Okay, just lost.
You got cookies.
All right, we're about to start. Jimmy, are you guys about ready?
Hugh says hello.
All right, give me.
Did you see him today?
You haven't started yet, have you? You already started? Oh, okay.
Last night.
All right. Call the special budget meeting of the council to order. And with that, I'll turn it over to Robert.
So get us out of here quicker. Okay, so here are the updated agendas. Let's teach a little bit. Right now, of course, we're a little bit condensed as far as our time today because of the Salish discussion. Same thing on Monday as far as our schedule right now. We have,
Thank you.
we're going to go right into the department operating budget presentations today. On Monday, we are going to add a 5-year forecast and a little bit more analysis on the revenue and expenditure projections. So we're going to start with that on Monday, but today we're going to go into, get as much as we can done with, we're going to do another review of fire. We're going to do community development, IT, and then as much of public works as we can get done today. This is just a tentative schedule for this evening. And we have a hard stop at 7:30 to switch to the Salish discussion.
Whose job is it to keep us on that schedule?
Drew.
I never really saw you as a bad guy, but okay.
Well, as the chair, I'll be reminding him too. We have actually a hard stop at 7:25 because we'll need a 5-minute turnover so they can retitle the video stream.
Okay, and I'll hand it over to the chief.
And people can take a break.
Alrighty, Mark Carrera, Fire Chief, Director of Emergency Management. This is just going to be a recap of the presentation that I gave the other night. And our goal is to focus on some of the requests that came from council last week regarding numbers, and then also try to recap some of the information that was in the budget. So some of the challenges that we have regarding our core services, and this was part of the presentation I gave the Mayor Bob Larson and the Finance Department, is regarding our training and safety standards. Administratively, we're struggling to keep up with the required standards that are out there, and that's both in the emergency management side and on the fire department side. We're doing some things internally that is going to relieve some of the stress in some areas, but also create some stress in other areas. So our goal is to try to look for solutions related to that. As you know, the landscape within the community is changing. That's why there was a request for the aerial apparatus, and in fact, I'm hoping to submit the grant either later tonight or tomorrow morning first thing, and we should hear sometime next year whether or not we're successful in that grant application for the ladder truck. And then lastly, we're going to continue to maintain our programs. We also have some interest in expanding some of our programs. There's some things that we're not doing in both emergency management and on the fire side that are administrative heavy, and this would allow us to look at those programs. As an example, an Explorer post we met with, similar to the law enforcement side, we've been approached multiple times to try to do an Explorer post. We just don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to take that on, and that's one of the programs that we'd be certainly interested in pursuing. This is the budget related to the personal services. As with the other budgets, as I understand it, it's a 3% to 5% growth for the employee's salary and benefits. This does not include any additional staff, but the average for that line is 4.8%. And I can take any questions if you want as we go through this.
You note a little change in format, they're just putting an emphasis on what the narrative is referring to with the outline.
What was that?
A little change in format where now there's an emphasis on what line the narrative is talking about. Just so your eyes aren't all over the place, at least you know where the focus is related to the narrative below, and then they'll move to the next items. Or anywhere there's been significant changes. Councilmember Shepherd, you had a question?
Yeah, the proposed enhancements, we've got a division error. Is that because we don't have anything for?
Councilmember Shepherd, if you could use the microphone, I'm not sure if you're being picked up.
That's good. I can't hear you.
You want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so the proposed enhancements, we've got a division error. It looks like we don't have anything for 2018 projected, so I guess that, I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, if you could
We'll get,
Again, to this forum, I just want to keep our conversations focused so we move through this more smoothly. So if there's any questions on the top line that's surrounded in a bold red line,
Oh,
are there any
okay.
questions on personnel and benefits issues? Okay, Councilmember Mayhew.
So my question isn't specific to this department, because I've gone back and reviewed some of the slides from the other two presentations. And so I don't know if now is, in fact, now is probably not the time because we're focused on the fire department, but I don't understand that 5%, a lot of these have 5% for person. It seems like a very big number. I know our union contracts are not going up anywhere near that much. I thought I heard that the health benefits weren't going up that much. So I think there's some other things going on here that probably would make more sense to be addressed, because I think you're doing something across all of the departments. And so maybe if you guys could just take down, like you do, maybe this is at our next session or whenever is appropriate, but kind of, at least for me, I'd like to go back through that and kind of understand, because I just do my scribbles, and across departments it adds up to a lot of money. So I'm just trying to, if
Well,
I do
that
3
same
or
question
4 or
came up
5.
last time, and I knew you guys were going to look at that. Did you?
Well, as we explained, the different questions. Last time was we did have a couple charts that we just had the formulaic issue there. But a couple things. One, we don't know what healthcare is going to be, of course, in 2020, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So we still
in
have
20,
it.
yeah.
We have it grown. We're still having it growing 5% in 20, but we're growing everything. It's pretty standard to do so in personnel services, where we're growing on average about 5% a year. And part of that is picking up all the step increases, salary increases, longevity, and then any increases that are calculated off pay, whether it be FICA, whether it be Social Security. So it's pretty common to use that 5% increase. And same thing with PERS rates. The state gives us rates. They're pretty nominal increase this year, but we get a nominal increase every year. So you just want to make sure we're capturing everything that could possibly be out there. So the question is, could it be lower? Sure. Has it been higher at times? Sure. So 5% is the average that we're using.
Okay, so maybe, again, I want to get off this because I don't want to take up the chief's time, but.
Well, no, I think it's relevant to this budget and other ones, so I think it's a great.
Well, I think maybe when we look at the total budget, sort of the total operating budget put together, and kind of look at the difference between 3%, 4%, 5%, I think we may discover we're talking about a lot of money. And I think that when we get to some of the rubs on things like tax rates that we're going to have to fund those, and I just think that this might be worth, in my opinion, be worth the time talking about this in total and really challenging ourselves whether putting too much money into the budget here, and it's really going to end up being more than we're actually going to spend. Because if there's a big pile of money here, when you put it all together, that we actually aren't going to spend, then I think that means we're making choices not to spend that somewhere else, which may not be a choice we want to make. So in essence, it ends up potentially being a choice to budget something that never gets spent, and therefore not budget something else that we might like to do. Or alternately, another way to look at it is budget for something we're not going to spend and then raise taxes to cover that, even though we actually are never going to spend it. So it just seems like this could be something that bears a little more scrutiny, not department by department, because this is a global decision or a set of assumptions being made, but at that global level.
And I think there's going to be a handful of areas that have more global implications that will merit additional dialogue from the council. It's a matter of it's certainly the council's purview to if a majority's wishes to do so, to ask for an adjustment to that. It's just a matter of what is your appetite for risk.
Right, exactly. And so maybe that's a valuable conversation, given that collectively it may be a big number. So as we look up here, for example, I know we're not talking about this moment, but we'll end up maybe spending some time on a $25,000 enhancement, when if we actually look across the difference between 4 and 5%, all put together, may be a much larger dollar amount that we may also think is worth spending a little bit of time on. And maybe we end up saying, no, this is right, but I think it's worth some more discussion.
What we can do to help facilitate, I think, that discussion a bit, we could put together a history of the health rate increases for the past, like 5 years or so.
Or a combination of all those.
And the same thing with
Yeah.
the PERS increases.
Yeah, how they've
to show,
trended.
and then the
That would
same
be
thing
very
with the
helpful.
salary
Yeah,
increases
just
as
help
far
us
as
understand
steps.
how you
we
got
could-
Can
to
really
here.
change dramatically.
So I was going to suggest we kind of put that as a parking lot item. Once we get through all the departments and we get back looking at a few of those global issues, that's when we discuss. And
I mean, I do have a little concern as far as the PERS rate. I mean, what we're watching and why we're erring on the side of probably, building that 5% in is, of course, healthcare right now. We're almost blessed with the 3% increase because the average increases out in the market right now are 7 to 10%, which people think are good. And of course, we came in lower, so that's good, and that freed up, and we went make those corrections. That did free up some money in 19, but 20, we're not budgeting that so far. And then the same thing with PERS rates. When you look at the investment portfolio of the state PERS system, depending on what the market does, as you know, what the rate of returns are. If there was a dramatic change in the market, but who knows, that's another big question mark out there that could change the rate we're paying, meaning if their investments go down next year, their portfolio goes down, doesn't perform well, they pass those rate increases on to us, of course, to make their system solvent. So those are the factors that we try to build in. It's definitely throwing a dart.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll get you more historical information.
Yeah, help us buy into those, because I think those are some of the big dollar drivers. Help us buy in and understand those.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we're leaving. That's a good global one on all the budgets, but you've now got 10 minutes left, so we'll kind of keep trying to move here.
Can I have a question, though?
Councilmember Roth.
Can you go back to the previous slide, please? So the top one states, administrative staff is unable to keep up with state and federally mandated training standards because of lack of dedicated training and safety officer. In talking with Chief Carrera a couple of weeks ago before I left on my vacation, he indicated that he was going to put in an administrative officer as additional personnel that would handle a lot of this, as well as the Explorer posts and things like that. So is it not included in this budget?
I'll ask Bob to speak to that.
That's correct. We went through the enhancement requests for staffing, for operations, for capital, and this particular time Mayor's not in a position to recommend that to council. We're looking at other options, but for instance, maybe additional training funding that Mark could use for next year and the year after, or looking at potentially in the future a training officer. There was about a request for 12 staff, new positions throughout the entire budget, including utilities. And the mayor is recommending, I believe, 3 to 4 positions at this time overall.
Which is one of the more significant increases in positions we've done in years. So.
Right. But I am aware that they also create revenue. I think you've forecasted 130,000 coming up this year and next year. I mean, if they can, from that revenue that the fire department creates, can they support an administrative position?
Those are not dedicated funds to the fire department. We expect all departments to go look for monies like that for grants and other obviously assistance, but they do not go back to those departments exclusively. They go back to the general fund. That helps to fund the entire budget. We have in the past, the previous council did agree, as an example for basic life support, that we come up with a scenario whereby they started charging for transfers to basic life support.
Right.
And the idea was that would fund 1, possibly 2 firefighter positions for daytime staffing. And the agreement was that the chief could find that, the previous chief and this current chief, to continue that scenario, that we could see fit, then the council did, to help fund that position. And then subsequent to that, the city went out for a levy lid lift for an additional position to cover the balance, I believe, for the one firefighter per shift of the 3 shifts.
So another way to look at it is if Mark's department, community development department, goes out and helps facilitate the construction of a new hotel that brings in $300,000 of revenue, Mark could come back and say, well, I can hire 2 more people now because I just brought a bunch of revenue in from my department. And that's where Bob is saying we got to be careful not to always draw a direct nexus between those revenue sources. With that said, I'd like to incentivize and reward when department directors go out and find innovative ways to bring in revenues. When Chief Rowe came in a few years back and proposed some increases in staffing, one of it was, hey, I can implement a transport fee, and he did some projections on what kind of revenue that could bring in. He thought it would cover two firefighters. Bob and I have usually taken a little bit more of a conservative course to say, well, why don't we launch that first? And I think we committed to one firefighter and then measure what actual revenue is there before we, don't count our chickens before they hatch. And so that's what I think we will continue to explore, as you heard the chief say, exploring things like an accident response fee. I mean, going to an accident on the freeway, for example, and charging that to an auto insurance or a response to a fire, a home fire, and then that would go against the homeowner's insurance. Our ways, and then if we're successful working with Eastside Fire and Rescue, extracting more dollars on a continuous basis from the mitigation fund connected with the casino or the tribe, those would be ways that we could start adding up those dollars. And then I think when we have more confidence about what actually would come in, then that informs how much we would commit there. Does that pertain to your question?
That's exactly what I was going to say, yeah.
Okay. So we'd rather not leap, I mean, given that we're already making a pretty big push in terms of increases in FTEs this year and some departments that have been neglected for several years, and per the council's direction and goals and objectives on which ones we think need the most attention, it's definitely a need, but we can't fund everything, unfortunately. We'd rather take that for a test drive beforehand. Any other questions on that? All right. Don't feel like you got 5 minutes left, Mark, where there's a lot of.
No, we can just hand it over to somebody else. Come on up.
Oh, no. Just keep moving. So I think we're done with line 1 on personnel?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll move to the next then.
So the services is increasing by 20.9%. This assumes 3% growth in most services and supplies, basically the things that we use, the dispensables or the expendables in the fire department. But it also, and I think Drew can speak directly to the actual increase related to the equipment replacement fund on the fleet side. And that was discussed at the last budget meeting, or actually.
Yeah, I just want to make a side note on that, because you're still going to see it in the charts. We are still working with Public Works to research that, and we'll have more information in the following workshops.
Councilmember Sunwell?
Is the, what's the word? Is the switching out of the back of the ambulance, sorry, I'm figuring out the words, is that built into this? So I know we're going to keep the chassis the same, swap out the.
Yeah, the remount, yeah.
The remount, there we
Yeah.
go. Is that built into this budget? Is that what is in here?
It is, yes, correct.
Okay. And that's
Everything so far is in this, as far as the equipment replacement, except for the delta between the current rig and the ladder truck.
Yeah, all existing apparatus is funded. We'll come back probably at the beginning of the year.
And you went into that in a little more detail at the last budget meeting, I think, on some of these items, did you not?
Yeah.
Councilmember Holloway and Councilmember
So for
Mayhew?
2019, what is the cost for the equipment replacement repair?
Outside of the 3% increase that you see there, I would say roughly $100,000, which is what Robert's going to conclude here shortly.
Councilmember Mayhew?
I just want to be clear, because this is an operating, but you're showing us the operating budget here, is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I was looking at I thought the other guy was going to answer. So, okay, now I'm struggling for the same words. The back of the
Remount of the ambulance.
The remount.
Or replacement, yeah.
That's actually,
Appurtenance.
the remount is happening, that's happening in the ER&R fund?
Yes.
So it's not part of this operating fund, other than to the extent that, well, it's not part of this operating fund. It's part of the ER&R fund, correct?
Correct, so it's embedded in the ER&R charge that's in.
Sort of, yeah, right.
But it's
Okay.
housed in the fleet. It's
Right,
housed
I
in
just,
ER&R.
the reason is just I was a little confused by your answer, because I know you showed us those 3 pots. I think you're trying to get us to really separate between operating, capital, and then the utilities. And so this being the operating, actually that remount is actually over in the, you're putting the internal service funds with the capital. So it's actually out of that pot.
Correct.
And then there's some recharge from that pot back into here, right?
Exactly.
Okay. But it's not dollar for dollar, because a lot of that stuff's spread over years, right?
Spread over years, right?
Yeah, so it's really a charge against the ER&R, that remount, true?
That's correct.
Thanks. So not against this operating
That's
budget.
why we're doing some deeper research as far as how the allocations, so we're making sure we've got the allocations matching what the department needs are and the department replacement schedules are. Is that correct?
Thanks.
So the difference, the answer to the previous question, the difference in the budget for ER&R charges, as it stands right now, was we budgeted for 71,686. And what we have in the budget now for 2019 is 174, approximately $174,000. 2020, $182,000. But again, we are evaluating those charges at this point, and we will be coming back to you with ER&R at a future workshop, either next week.
Okay, but if
Councilmember Holloway.
I go 18 to 19 and I calculate 3%, it's, what, 12,000, that's $12,000, I believe. And then I take that difference between those years, I take 12,000 out, I get $105,000. So I'm confused, the numbers aren't not meshing for me.
Right, so part of it, I mean, we'd have to go line item by line item to describe the changes. So what we did was we did some cleanup on the actual line items that were budgeted in 18. So that's why it's not an exact science, where we have some line items where if we're projecting them to come in under budget, there's some quote unquote savings there. Does that make sense? Like if we have a line item, say that's 80% of budget that's coming in for the year, and we don't anticipate to spend the full 100 next year, we've made adjustments to the line items within services and supplies.
So Drew did estimate $100,000. You're talking about a $5,000 difference there. But
He was saying 174 and I'm saying 174.
For the particular line item, but again, to do the math, we'd have to go through line item by line item.
Agreed, but I'm still looking at least the words on the chart. If I associate numbers with them, I ought to be able to back into the numbers up above. And well, maybe it's the difference between major changes and just changes. I'm not getting a complete picture in the change section.
Again, we'd have to, if the council would like to go line item by line item, we can.
yeah, I mean, Drew and I had talked about this. I thought one of the ways to do this was like, underneath that line item would be 5 bullets summarizing the major items that add up to a number. But then to get to an exact number, you'd have to put probably 25 items to get to 500 for this, 300 for that, 150, and then you start just getting into the weeds. And so, Councilmember Shepherd, then Mayhew, sorry.
So maybe this has been asked and I just missed the question, but I don't understand why we've gone up almost 21% between 18 and 19, and then we're going back to 3.4%. The largest jump is between 18 and 19 for services and supplies.
Right. So again, the bulk of that jump is going from 71,686 in 18 for ER&R charges to 174 in 19. And we talked about this a little bit last time, where unfortunately there was an allocation error that was made a couple of years ago that we're trying to make sure that we're reflecting the true cost. We've evaluated the allocations. We still are on ER&R. And so part of that evaluation was to increase approximately, in this case, approximately $100,000.
In other words, it's an adjustment of the charge from the fleet department to this department for its vehicles and fleet. And there's been an adjustment in that allocation.
So would we see a comparable decrease to wherever it was being charged to? Are you talking about charging to one place versus another? Is that what you're talking about?
That wasn't the full issue. So some of the issue was there wasn't enough charge outs as it was. So almost all the charge outs have been increased.
It's an additional
to the
amount.
department. So it's pretty much, I think there's some exceptions, but it's pretty much an additional charge. So in the fire department case, it was being undercharged.
2 years ago, we saw a decrease across the board in all the departments because there was a calculation or some analysis that we were putting too much in there, and now we're revisiting that, realizing maybe that was, we undershot it or overestimated how good that was, and now we're readjusting.
Oh, this is when we underestimated how much we need to
right.
hold in reserve for future
Right, so we're basically
okay.
we're having to put more back into the fleet program across the board in all departments. You're going to see bumps,
Okay.
a bigger allocation to all departments.
But again, we get to that second year, then we're just growing it by inflation at that point.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, so just a suggestion, what you might do, what I've seen done in other similar presentations is just have a third line item in your bullets down there that just says something like other minor changes collectively equaling $4,000.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I don't think you have to go all the way to the 25-item list.
So
but
try to
just
keep
say,
it to like 4 or 5 major items.
and then just add up all the rest that you're not calling out because they're not major, and say, and there's a bunch of others that collectively add up to $4,000,
and then a total
$3,900.
And then a total that aligns with the difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that way, I think you get away from this, without having to go to the details, you get away from the concern here, yeah.
Yeah, if you're buying 20% fewer pencils, God bless you, but I don't care at this stage. But I do want to be able to try to rack and stack this and get back to the numbers.
Councilmember Shepherd?
So if I want to do a sanity check on this 21% delta, where in this budget would I find that changing in 2019? What would I see?
General fund revenue.
I
Charge
just
to
want
the
to
fire.
know, we only had this much and we're going to be expecting, like last year, we only put in this much into this bucket. Now we're going to be putting this much more into this bucket. What bucket is that I would go to?
That's the ER&R fund, and we are going to have that discussion next week.
You'll
So
see a
we
re-
definitely-
Okay.
You'll
You'll see an
definitely
increase
see
in
the
revenue to the
charge-outs.
ER&R fund.
Yes, you're going to see the charge-outs by department.
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Lasay?
We spent 20 minutes on 2 slides. I'd like to get through a few more.
Well, 2 lines, yeah.
It would be exact, it's 27.
Thanks for a time check. All right. Yeah, again, great questions and great clarifications. Hopefully it helps with the rest of the slides.
You were going to second
I can
that.
stop now if you'd like and hand it.
But I would just,
More about the
yeah, if we
enhancements
could all
and
kind of do a time check for ourselves to keep it moving along. And let's not repeat things if they seem like they've been settled. All right, if you could continue, Mark. Yeah. I think we beat that one to death.
So small tools and equipment is the main purpose of the capital outlay. We had requested some additional funding into the equipment replacement fund.
Okay, I'm going to guess that the numbers haven't changed there. We don't have any questions here. Let's keep moving.
Yeah, wrenches and stuff, yeah.
Okay, now you're moving to the next line on, well, I'm sorry, go back a second.
What's the
So,
intergovernmental?
Is there anything, there's nothing really on intergovernmental to address. He's going to jump to proposed enhancements.
Yeah, the 3% is a forecast for increase. Proposed enhancements,
So $70,000 enhancement in 19 and 25,000 in 20. Now he'll go into the details on that. Okay.
so there's two enhancements that make up the $70,000. The fire equipment replacement fund, I already talked about that. That's where we're going to use to replace our SCBA's and our heavy jaws of life and our lifting tools and things like that. It's all listed up on the board there, and it's a $30,000 in 2019 and then $15,000 in 2020 so that we can cover the expenses over the next 2 years. I talked with Drew today about moving forward, going into this next biennium to really develop a list of equipment that's a true capital equipment item in the fire department, and then building a long-term strategy to fund these so that this isn't something that comes up every 2 years that I'm presenting on, hey, I need a little bit more money in this fund. It'd be great if we could develop it similar to the ER&R fund where the money just goes in there and it covers those expenses, those large equipment costs. Training increases, they're adding $25,000 in 19 and $25,000 in 2020. This is a bridge that we see it, as I talked about before, to help support the administrative departments in the fire department. Our goal with these funds are to try to connect ourselves with either a training consortium or look at other training opportunities locally. This also includes some online training where we can get some of those federally required or locally required training standards out of the way, where the firefighters can do it online so it's more efficient. And it also helps support the volunteer firefighter training piece. We've been running out of options on how to train our volunteer firefighters in fire training. We send 2 to 3 of them to training per year, and our goal is to send them up to the Washington State Fire Training Academy this next year. This is the emergency management side now. I'm not going to obviously read the slide, but really the emergency management side of things is basically the planning, the response, and mitigation planning for the city regarding to floods and other types of natural and man-made disasters. There's one FTE in there, but technically from a budgeting perspective, it's half of me and half of the administrative support staff in the fire department. That's a budgeting exercise so that we qualify for federal grants. That's certainly not the time that I'm investing into emergency management. And that's one of the areas that we're really deficient on, that we're trying to focus on over this next term. This is our performance indicators. Making sure our comprehensive emergency management plan is updated. Number of training hours by city staff. We're required by federal law to actually train all of our staff in emergency management, and NIMS is what it's called, National Incident Management System. Those are some areas that we're deficient in, and then also training the staff in the EOC to actually respond to a disaster. We haven't had an exercise in a few months, but we've actually been scheduling them on the 5th Tuesday so that we can get them get the staff out of the way during our staff meeting months when we don't have a staff meeting. We're also trying to expand our number of CERT-trained people. We've been struggling with getting people involved with that training this year, but we're looking at changing things up going into next year to make it more advantageous to get more people involved. Similar to the fire side, this federally mandated requirements that we're struggling with. The administrative support side is really a struggle. We also requested some administrative support staff for this as well, hoping to free up my time to actually be able to do some of these things in emergency management. And really, at the end of the day, it's about making sure that we're ready to respond to a mass disaster. At any time, we could have an earthquake. At any time, at least with flooding, we know that's going to happen and we can prepare for it, but an earthquake is a little bit more unpredictable. And so our goal is to be ready for anything that hits the city. And really, let me see here. Okay. So the first one is personal services line. It's going up 4.8%. That's the similar, as I understand it, similar to the last prediction, the 3 to 5% prediction for staff costs. Services and supplies is going up 11.1%. That's for, is that for operating supplies, Drew? Yes. Because there shouldn't be anything, I don't think there's anything into the ER&R fund out of emergency management.
Councilor Mayhew? I'm sorry, Councilor Holloway.
So can we go back, though, because I'm
Certainly.
still back in the fire department.
How far back?
Just to
Oh,
fire department proposed enhancements.
He's adding up the numbers.
Well, so let's just take 2019. So I got $30,000 for the equipment replacement. I got $25,000 for the training increase. I have one FTE, but really that's existing staff, so it really doesn't affect the budget. You're going to grant for that. I'm not sure what the management department performance measure does, but all I can get from $30,000, $25,000, $55,000, I'm missing, sorry, but I'm missing $15,000.
I apologize for that. That's my mistake. I will correct that and resend the presentation out.
And so the real number is
So what's-
55?
Yes, only 2 enhancements are proposed within the fire department's operating budget. And it's those 2 enhancements that are listed in front of you there.
The training request was actually greater and got adjusted, so that's why the number on that primary page is not accurate.
Well, and check your 2020 numbers, too.
That equals 40.
Any questions on the emergency management stuff?
Yeah. We've got capital outlay, or proposed
Well,
enhancements,
well-
division error. Are we,
Councilor Mayhew.
I can explain that if you'd like. Sorry.
okay.
So the proposed enhancement on the emergency management, there wasn't a slide for it, but it's the CERT trailer. We're talking about replacing our CCAS vehicle. There's some risk and liability associated with that with ongoing maintenance and training. And our proposition was to bring in a trailer that we could actually deliver to the scene and it will still function as a command post for the volunteers that staff the CCAS group. That's the $20,000 proposed.
There is a slide.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, so that's that.
I don't have my glasses on. Okay. That was the delta between? Management side, okay. 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 Oh, and that's in the services and supplies, the communications expense, okay. You're just letting me know that the increase of the 11.1% was for the communication side of it. And then there's no capital outlay, intergovernmental is just the 3% normal forecast, and then the 20,000 is for the CCAS vehicle, which is on this slide right here. One-time expense.
Just to clarify on that piece for emergency management, we had not budgeted enough for miscellaneous communication, if you wanted to elaborate what's in that line item. We had only budgeted 3,500, but we're projecting 7,300 for this year, so we're going on that. I'm sorry, excuse me, we're projecting 8,600 this year, so that's what we're budgeting. That increase is what you're seeing there.
Councilor Mayhew.
Can you go back to slide 9?
14.
So just something, Mayor, Finance Director, if you could could think about another way to solve this, because it doesn't seem like you'd necessarily want to set up a ISF just for such small dollar amounts, but another way you could think about this is I get the feeling, as I just think about last year's budget and the budget before and this, I think to the chief's point, there's sort of a fire equipment replacement that's happening on a regular basis. And maybe the other way to solve this is to go ahead and think of a certain dollar amount as actually just being part of his base budget. So instead of this being called out as an enhancement every year, that would accomplish the same goal of just him just knowing he has an amount every year that he can take care of that kind of equipment with, and it doesn't have to get called out every year. So just a suggestion for you guys to think about.
So is the own internal equipment replacement fund, so to speak? Internal to
I'm
the
saying not
department.
do that. I'm saying instead just give him budget every year for equipment replacement as part of the
Right, a
base
budgeted
budget.
capital
I can
outlay each year.
I can explain. So some of the equipment we have has a 20-year lifespan on it, like our self-contained breathing apparatus. We're going up to replace it next year. It's been in existence for 19 years. They're due for replacement. If I just had a small amount in the annual budget that didn't roll over in an enterprise forum, I'd still be coming forward asking for $150,000 or $200,000 for that expense. And whereas if that's what Drew and I were talking about doing, is trying to set up that fund and kept putting all of those capital expenses that are in there, because we have a lot of very expensive equipment in the fire department, and help better prepare the city to react to those needs as we move forward.
Yeah, and that's all great. I'm just suggesting that doesn't necessarily need council attention, this sort of dollar amount. If we know it's every year, and, but just, I'm taking up more time than I need to on it. Just a suggestion to think about.
Okay.
On the
Councilmember Holloway.
CCAS trailer, the out-of-service ambulance, was that in the ER&R fund?
Not that I'm aware of.
So I'm concerned then that there's city-owned equipment that's not in the ER&R fund, so I come the other way. My question is, when we buy the trailer, will it go into the ER&R fund?
I think, yes, we want to make sure that we're depreciating that so we can replace it at a point in time. I don't know why we didn't.
Money, Chief.
I do not know why it was not placed in the R&R in the first place, but I can go back and research if
So
council's
that's
interested.
kind of my question is, if a prior ambulance was in the ER fund, shouldn't the trailer be paid out of the ER&R fund?
We're planning,
keep that
we'll
linked
plan on
up.
putting it in.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So one of the questions I'm curious about is that we have reciprocal service between agencies.
Or just, Councilmember Shepherd, hold a sec. Councilmember Jeans, I know sometimes you're having a hard time hearing. Please just ask me to direct people to speak up or, interject. I don't want you feeling like you're having to struggle or politely not calling people when you can't hear what they're saying.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Shepherd, if you could maybe speak up a little more, too. I know he's straining to hear you.
Oh, so anyway, we have reciprocal services between fire departments, and when we have a ladder truck coming from other agencies, what is the financial relationship with, do we spend something? Do we just provide exchange services, or how does that work?
Sure. So we're part of the mutual aid agreement right now in the King County. There was actually a discussion about an automatic aid agreement, which is similar to the mutual aid agreement. Currently, the agreement allows for agencies to exchange funds for certain services if both agencies agree. But as being a signatory on it, there's no cost requirement for us to have to pay for somebody to come in. Similarly, there's no requirement for them to have to pay us if we go outside the city.
So is there any money going back and forth for these services?
No.
Okay,
No.
thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks.
Now on to Mark. The other Mark. Mark Hoffman, Community Development Director. That's me. The first two slides kind of give a background of our core mission and our organization and how we came to be in our current status. Right now, it's 7 full-time employees, split between the building division and the planning division that make up the community development department. And 3 of those, as you know, are specific to the building function, and 3 are specific to planning. The department mission, as shown on the slide, is quality public service and municipal planning, building code enforcement, and economic development, including serving both internal and external customer. I'm assuming.
Or Mark, I'm going to ask all the departments for the sake of time. Council members can read the department missions and department core
One
services.
additional note to this slide is that we provide building division contract services to the city of Carnation, similar to what IT has. On the next slide has the breakdown of what the individual roles are, 3 in planning, 3 in building, doing essentially one-stop seamless work from the time that you come in with a concept, hey, what's the zoning on this property, to the time that you're constructed and you get occupancy. These FTEs cover that process. In 2015, before I got here, they were 2 separate departments. The city chose to merge those 2 and go with 1 director instead of 2. At that time, when I was hired to be the first community development director as opposed to a planning director, we went through about a 4-month period where I kind of learned what was going on, the work levels, what was expected in the future. At that time, we had 1 vacancy, and that was the vacancy filled by Ben Swanson, who's now in City of Monroe. But we did not add FTEs. So both departments were merged into the CD department through consolidation, 1 less director position for the city. And I covered the one-stop. Most of this you've already read. We'll just blow through that. They're the committees that we report to and attend. Our primary documents are the comprehensive plan, municipal code, and state codes and building codes. Now we get to the important slide. Not quite yet. We were asked for metrics. They're not very easy because a number can mean many things. So whether we're tracking the number of general land use applications, one is not equivalent to the other. For a good example is a general land use application for an awning downtown on a brewery would be 1 application. The application for a master plan for Salish would be 1 application. Both are extreme examples of the amount of time that we would spend on that number. But these are the 3 that are generally used to track through time how busy a department is. And once you factor in the complexity and the scale of the actual project, that gives you the actual metric as opposed to the number of applications. What's commonly tracked is the number of housing units or building permits issued. And as you see, those have dropped to near 0 for this budget because Snoqualmie Ridge 2 is essentially at completion of the residential components. After that burst, we were down to 2 or 3 small areas that do not have buildings on them, but they're approaching build-out. The 2 items of concern based on that past of merging departments that we have to focus on in this budget are staffing and then retention and training. We lost our senior planner, who's now the director of Monroe, which is highly encouraged. Would hate to be in that position anytime soon, but the staffing is primarily the focus in our enhancement requests. For this first slide, we can go line by line. Personnel services, one of the big changes there is that there are no silos here, but also in the budget. It's reflected when Nicole Sanders was brought on board. It was a 60-40% split in. I'm going to do, oh, yeah, I got red light. And so the numbers aren't linear in the sense that we're adding 3 or 5% and they go up to that. In that context, there was some adjustment in the line items themselves to accurately reflect the shared FTE or the shared salary portion between Public Works and Planning. And when you get to the enhancements, and I'll cover this in just a moment, that's an additional FTE for an assistant planner, which is generally the progression is planning tech, assistant planner, associate planner, senior planner, principal planner, director. So we're asking for an assistant level. But the variation you see from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, part of that is that the 60-40 split in the budget for Parks, Public Works, and for Nicole's position is now hopefully accurate, in addition to the 5%.
Councilmember Sunwell.
So where is this assistant planner built into the budget?
Under enhancements, and I can go to those.
Okay, cool, thanks.
I'll come back to those other services and supplies. But for enhancements,
Sorry, I
this
just
is
didn't understand what you were, could you just,
want me to close out that one issue?
yeah, somehow the 60-40 thing is, I'm just not getting it. So,
Where it showed up is, I clarified going into this budget, hey, there's a 60-40 split for one of our senior planner positions. And
no, I'm just trying to trace into the numbers. I get the concept. Well, I think I do. You charge 40% of someone's budget to another department. Was it just for 1 year, or for how many years did that occur?
Well, we didn't go retroactive, but it's from this point forward.
Oh, we're doing it prospectively.
Yes.
It happened.
Oh, no, he said prospectively means it hasn't happened yet.
From this point forward. In other words, with this budget going into 2019.
So we're going to reduce your staff?
No. The staff stays the same, but Nicole's position was always a 60-40 split in charges. That was not reflected in the line item to the full extent. And so now it would.
So in 19, are we going to be splitting her salary between departments, or we're not going to be doing that?
We are. 60-40.
And why are we doing that?
That was the setup when she was brought on board. And it's beyond the no silos thing. A major portion of what she does is for utilities. And even though the FTE is in planning division, she does a lot of work for the Public Works division.
So there's a number of projects in the CIP that's been presented during the revenue bond update, for example. One of them was the Sandy Cove project, if you recall. I think there's a few others within stormwater itself where she's going to be leading the charge for the most part in managing those projects to completion. So given that fact, she's spending approximately, say, 40% of her time stormwater, but also probably on other activities too.
The advantage is it takes pressure off the limited general fund revenue.
You guys aren't speaking to my question. Why wouldn't it go to the utility fund then? I'm not understanding how this results in something going to Parks and Public Works. That's the part I'm not getting.
I think that is.
Because if her time is servicing the utility departments, then it's rightly billed to the utility department.
But they're not going to charge it to there. They're charging it to Parks and Public Works.
Public work, utilities is Public Works.
No, utilities is utilities. It's a whole different pot of money.
We're charging.
Either way, the fix is to reflect the 60-40. The action was in 2013, 2014 when Nicole came on board.
Someone say that it's being charged, it should be charged to utilities. It's not Parks and Public Works, it's a utilities fund, it's a funding source. And if it's not that way, it should be corrected.
Yeah.
Should be in
Okay,
utilities.
that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, because there's no advantage to shifting
Yeah, I'm
around
not
from-
questioning the 60-40.
Yeah.
I'm
It
trying
just makes
to
it messier,
understand.
more complicated. We're shifting it from planning to parks if it's still in the general fund. The only time we've redone these reallocations is to relieve pressure on general fund to put it on appropriate utilities.
That
But
makes sense. I was just trying to match the words I was hearing.
Yeah, I know. We're
and
trying to.
It wasn't working for me.
I think
and
we're trying to
was
get a
just like, huh?
clean answer to that. So
Where it's reflected here is that a small portion is no longer in my line item for personnel.
Okay, but so then the part I still don't get is you seem to be describing some change, and I'm trying to figure out where the change is, because I thought I heard you say.
Primarily, it's right there, 405,000 in 2016, 407,000 in 2017. All of a sudden, you get to 2018, everyone's progressed, had their evaluations upped in class, and it drops to 386.
So 18 is when we did it, not prospectively. 18, we already did this. We're doing this currently in 18.
My assumption is it starts January 1st.
But then how?
well, no, yes, you're trying to explain the difference of why you have a red box around the difference between 17 and 18. So you're trying to explain why that difference, why did it drop, and then why is it into perpetuity in that?
Well, my words were when we first started this budget and we did a projection, and then my question was, And I don't know the line items and where it goes to and so forth. What I wanted to make sure is the 60/40 was reflective from now forward, however you do it. Then when that first slide came out 4 weeks ago, there was a significant drop in personnel that was not explained by FTEs or positions, and it was due to that. There was not an employee that left. There's no employee that's making less, but there was a dip. How it's reflected in this chart and the line items can be amended, but the important part from the director is that now the split is in place. How you want it in the individual line items, we could work on.
So none of that addresses the question I'm asking.
When did the split take place? It looks to me like it took place between 17 and 18.
I didn't physically do the split, so
I don't
Based
care- I
on the
don't care
notes
who
that
did it.
I've read, the split took place in 2018.
Which would seem to explain why the numbers
21.
moved from 17 to 18 in the way that they do.
Correct.
Which is why that's what's surrounded with the red box.
Correct.
So this isn't a change to the coming budget. We're actually going to continue on with that
Correct.
split.
You see
into
the change,
1920.
4.8% between 19 and 18, as well as 5% between 20 and 19.
All right.
So all I'm doing is trying to describe the change,
Right. So Mr. Hoffman was just trying to help
anticipating
us.
your questions.
Yeah, yeah. So Mr. Hoffman was just trying to help us through understanding what happened between 17 and 18. But then what we're going to do is continue with that split going forward.
We
Is
are.
that right, Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
so that when you compare numbers to the actual enhancement, that you get not just the end number plus 108,000, but that the
Which
number
slides
makes
did you do
sense.
that on purpose?
Okay, is there any narrative, I don't see a next slide that explains then moving that red box to the next 2 years, 1920, why it jumps $20,000 from 405 to 410?
4.8%.
Well, it's the assumed
And
3 to
for
5%
20
increase is right, that we
That's-
plugged in.
Okay, so that's the standard, someone did the calculation, that's the 4.8 or 5%?
Okay, so now I'm caught up. You were trying to help us understand what happened between 17 and 18. And that's what you
Correct.
plan to go forward with. And then you're going to tell us about this
To use as a
enhancement.
base for 2019.
Caught up to you. Thank you very much. But I assume someone's going to follow up and make sure that's actually going to utilities. Okay.
Yeah, the correct line item. The important part is it's 7 FTEs in one department, 2 divisions, and we're adding an FTE, or we're requesting an FTE. So however the numbers work out, this is the important slide for our department. It's a new assistant planner position. It helps with 2 main city council goals, 1 and 6. Additional cost is $107,000, either 100 or 400. I have it rounded to 108. And it would be from here on out. So it's, in this budget, it's both 2019 and 2020. The other part of the enhancements is the money plugged in for the affordable housing study. And so when you get, and I'll go back, once you're familiar with this slide, I'll go back to the enhancements line on that very first community development slide.
So, hang on.
Councilmember Holloway and Councilmember Summerall.
I raised my hand first.
So I got a joke in the aerospace industry. It says, how long does a draftsman take to do a drawing? And the answer is, as long as you give them. $200,000 for a study.
Well, it's not just a study, it's a study and an update and preparation for what ends up in the next major update of the comprehensive plan.
I have no intention to spend that much money. As far as I'm concerned, we're going to try and structure it the same way we did the sustainability plan, as I said during the council retreat. We will reach out to UW or, Washington State
Yeah.
or some other partner with a graduate or undergraduate group to, put together a process of putting that together.
I did some canvassing of other cities and what they spent on the studies. The range seems to be between about 35 and on the low end, probably 75 on the real high end. What we wanted to do was, and I did come up with this number, so I'll take the blame for it. We wanted to fund that council initiative, meaning if there's any polls, any studies, even upfront money for projects, construction in the future. That's why we wanted to set aside the 200,000, but, we can revisit that number. If the council wants to lower that enhancement, we can lower it down and just do the study. So that's definitely on the table.
Move to take it to $75,000.
Second, unless that 200,000 is coming with some housing.
Have a motion and a second to reduce this number, the study number for the affordable housing to $75,000. Any discussion? Councilmember Mayhew and Councilmember Lissay.
So I have the impression, and please,
I hope not.
Mr. Hoffman, I have the impression, but I'm guessing that I'm wrong, but I have the impression that there are a whole number of organizations, not-for-profit, possibly for-profit. I certainly get emails from them here at the city, of organizations that are trying to push cities like us, all cities, to do more in the area of affordable housing. And so I have the idea that there are organizations that will come and talk to us and present quite detailed and sophisticated kind of information about what is being done in different parts of the country, what may be done in different parts of Washington State, what might be possible to do. And then we might be able to get all of that for free. So I'm guessing that I'm wrong, but maybe you could speak to just, I know maybe that's part of a great big answer, but could you use just a few, or at least help me understand why this really is a study kind of thing rather than bringing in some of these kind of organizations to educate us?
Well, the key word is might. Will we try? Absolutely. Do we expect to spend this? No. But we wanted to inform the budget for the city council goals this fall, get through budget, and then begin with a placeholder so that when we got into 2019 or mid-year, that there was money available for whichever direction the city council goes in. This would do that. This is a housing needs assessment. It's working with a group like Arch. It's the possibility of becoming an Arch city. None of those decisions have been made. This is merely informing the budget.
So got it. So let me just ask, could you just switch back to that enhancements page? So would it be possible, so with regard to the motion that we're discussing, which is lowering that, and with the idea that, what I thought I heard you say is you might like to have some money to, I might have confused your answer with another council member's comment, but have some money to start doing some things possibly in 2020. I wonder if it's maybe what we might do is lower this to 75,000 for 2019, but take the remainder and put it to 2020, meaning that we're intending to spend it then, but then as we go with the mid-biennium review and we look to fund that in 2020, we can really decide whether we'll know more about where we're at then. So would that sort of an approach make sense?
It is. It's somewhat front-loaded here with the assumption that we're going to jump right into it and complete it. The likelihood of that is that we will wrap it into 2020 and we'll need some money. So by staging it at 75, I think that will cover 2019.
All right, so I would just encourage my council members, I don't know how we do this in the context of the current motion on the floor, but perhaps what we do is we take the difference between 75,000 and I've now forgotten what your number is.
So it'll be 125 in 2020 then.
Yeah, and just shift the remainder to 2020 budget.
And you can make a decision to remove it at that time or leave it in.
That's right.
All right. Councilmember Lassay, then Councilmember Shepherd.
I think that's what's already in there. Mark, if you could put the slide up there for your first enhancement, which was the FTE, which is what, 108? 108 and 200 is not 302, it's 308. I'm not sure how that comes together. I like rounding. Rounding's good.
I believe the number on the earlier slide is 107,100.
What I would like to express to council is that we're talking about cutting, I'm going to use the word cut. We're talking about cutting a proposed budget by more than 50% based upon nothing we know. We're talking about allocating money based upon nothing we know. I mean, we don't even know where it starts. So we can go to 75 and go to 125, we can go to whatever, we can go to 12. The point is that, let's all remember this when this department comes back asking for more money to complete the affordable housing study in 2020. Thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd, Councilmember Holloway, and Councilmember Sunwell.
So I spoke to the Arch folks this year, and it sounds like if we want to become a member of Arch, it's going to be, his estimate, $15,000 a year. So it wouldn't be a one-time cost. It would be an ongoing expense if we do that. And from what I've read, it sounds like the best results for affordable housing as far as maintaining affordability is going to an organization such as Arch in order to understand what the business model should be to make it work. And I think we need that kind of support. As far as the rest of that money, I don't know what's needed. I agree with Councilmember Lissay as far as we don't understand the needs for the money, but I do know that I'm very much for Arch and becoming a member of Arch.
Okay, which is not the motion, but consider your position on the motion. Councilmember Holloway and Councilmember Sunwell.
So I'm probably more concerned of putting money in the budget that is unsupported by anything.
Councilmember Holloway, if you could use the microphone.
I come
a
from the
list.
other way, but to clarify, the finance director stated he called around and asked what these kind of studies cost, and he said on the high end, it was 75. When I had my dander up, I was at a lower number, but I took his high number to make sure we had enough. That's why the proposal was 75, based on the research he did.
Councilmember Sunwell, then Councilmember Lissay.
So I'll agree in part with what Councilmember Lissay said. I do believe on the first 75, we can agree with we can have a debate about whether or not we want to do a study, but what's being asked for specifically that was called out in the 200,000 or whatever is a study. What we've now come up with is the study is only going to be 75. And so I would agree with Councilmember Lissay on the back end. Beyond what's needed past the study, to me, is going to be determined on what the study says.
Exactly.
So why I'm supportive of this motion is at least conceptually, I understand the need to do a study. You've told us the study is going to cost no more than $75,000. Let's fund that, and then if we need to in the biennium review, based on what that study says, go get the rest of the $125,000 or whatever. We can talk about that. But what's asked for is very specific, and that's a study. And the reason for the motion is because that's the only thing that's supported in the 200,000.
It's,
right.
if I could clarify, because this is repetitive, and if we get another one, it's more than just a housing needs assessment. It's to capture the entire goal of the city council. The primary elements of that begin with a housing needs assessment. And you could plug the 75,000 in specific to that. But if that's where it ends, we're going to be back before you with money. The other major elements are an analysis of existing policy and regulations, both locally and at the state level and federal. The Arch review and possible membership, which was decided direction not to go in by prior council, but will be re-examined as part of this. And then looming in 2022 is your comprehensive plan update. When that is budgeted, a portion of that will include updating the housing element. What we're saying is, why do it twice? Part of this 200,000 would prepare you for that element in your major update. So it's more than just the 75,000 for a housing needs assessment.
So I'm going to do something for the sake of time. I know Councilmember Mayhew and Lissay are waiting to speak next, and I'll recognize you certainly. This was, if you took all the #1 priority objectives of all the goals, this would be in the top 7. There was clearly a strong unanimity amongst all the council members. This was one of the few goals that had strong unanimity and concern about addressing this issue. I think 200,000 is a bit excessive. It's unclear to me what would be done beyond, as the finance director has stated, beyond the $75,000 study. All I'm doing here is my budget is putting a placeholder on this, knowing it was a priority. It doesn't mean anybody's spent or committed. You have full control over that, and it gives you full latitude then to adjust that accordingly, because I know this is going to take at least a couple-hour discussion, which shouldn't take place tonight and going through a budget, or we'll never get there. And so I actually like Councilmember Mayhew's suggestion, and to answer his question, Councilmember Mayhew, what you can do is just do an amendment to the motion on the floor and suggest what you recommended, and then the council, I think it feels comfortable that $75,000 or less is a reasonable number for a study. And when that's largely competed through next year, then you still have this leverage in the budget to then address any other steps beyond that. Councilmember Mayhew, then Councilmember Lissay. And because I guess what I'm urging you to do is try and figure out a way to get beyond this and realize we're not going to resolve this discussion tonight. So try and figure out some mechanism where we can just get where you're comfortable with the budget, at least the majority of you, and then let's move on.
So My thought in budgeting is that what we're doing is we're setting a 2-year biennial budget. That's what we're doing. And so what we're looking at and what we're going to, at the end of the day, before we vote, we're going to have to come back and look at what do all of these expenditures add up to? And what revenues do we have, or are we willing to cause to have, as in imposing taxes? And that's going to be the limitation. So if we budget 75,000 and there is no other money for implementing in the biennial budget, we can't just tell ourselves, well, we'll decide then, because we won't have that option. We will have no revenue left to allocate. Okay? So that's the point of the budget. We have to end up with unless we're planning to leave a surplus in the budget, which is not the mayor's proposal, and I've not heard anyone suggesting that we're going to do that. So if we don't budget money, then we'll do a study, and it'll wait 2 years till anyone can do anything about the study, till we have another chance to get some money and budget. I would rather not spend $75,000 for a study that will be 2 years old before we can do anything with it, and we probably will decide to ignore it because it's stale. So in that case, I'd rather not do it at all. But let me be clear, I absolutely think that we should be doing something on affordable housing. And so I think that if a study is the first step, fine, but we need to budget money to do something beyond a study. And just because there are many, many things in this budget, this biennial budget, which staff cannot specifically tell us how they're going to spend. Okay? What we're doing is we're giving them a dollar amount to work with. And so I think that we should...
For the council to work with, yeah.
Well...
Both, yeah.
Both. And so I think that we should budget an amount that we can then use to do something with this study. And that's why now, because we think it'll take some, I mean, a $75,000 study isn't typically done in 2 weeks. So that's why I was saying maybe push this out till the second year. But I think to just make the funding go away, if we were just going to go down to 75,000, I'd rather go to zero. But let me be clear, I'd rather have enough money to do a study and do something with it. And so that's my plea to you. So with that said, I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion to move the difference between what was requested in the 75,000 into the 2020 budget.
Or 75,000 in 19 and 125,000 in 2020.
That's what I meant to say. If I didn't say it well, then as you said it.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second to amend the budget. Further discussion? Councilman Lissay.
I'm not as eloquent as my fellow council member, but that is exactly where I was headed, is that it's not a matter of when it's spent, it needs to be spent. What it needs to be spent is, I'm talking about the definition here, weird definitions, is unknown. But that's the same thing. We don't know what every single dollar is going to be spent on. We're giving a budget. And working in the architecture and construction industry, and especially in a planning industry, $75,000 for a study gets you a study. It gets you no follow-up, it gets you no community outreach, it gets you no assessment, it gets you no coordination with industry, it gets you no recruitment of affordable housing providers, it gets you no surveys of potential locations, it gets you nothing beyond that. And then it just is going to be there. And then it'll be outdated, and then we'll do this all over again. I don't mind, I agree with the amendment to allocate the 75,000 in 2019 and the 125 in 2020, as long as it's at the budget and we stick to the $200,000, and let's go through the process and we can decide if this is an area that we have to back off of, then we'll decide that based upon the entire budget. But I'd remind my council members that affordable housing was one of our #1 goals and objectives. Maybe number 6 on the list, but it was one of our #1 goals and objectives.
Councilmember Jeans, Councilmember Holloway.
No, I'll pass. What the gentleman have expressed clarifies concerns that I've had.
Councilmember Holloway.
So I guess I'm concerned that the basis of estimate for 2019 becomes what was left from the wagon 2019 is what I want put in 2020.
Why?
I've got no basis of support to say
Right.
that's the right number, wrong number.
We can give you a prime example if you'd like. This budget informing is based on a worst-case example of Walnut Creek, California. Affordable housing is regulated by the state and mandated to local jurisdiction. The housing element is one of the key elements of comprehensive plan update. There are a lot of regulations that state of Washington doesn't have. If I were in Walnut Creek, in front of their council right now saying we need to update our housing element for affordable housing, that 200,000 would approximate what that city would need. It's a much bigger city, it's more urban, they have different needs, but it is a concrete example of updating a comprehensive plan element that we will be doing in 2022. The advantage is that we can do a really good effort with this council goal and incorporate those strategies and policies into a new comprehensive plan element in one swoop.
Councilman,
gotta
I would
move on.
ask maybe compromise, why don't we do 75 each year? And that way we can figure out what it really costs without putting it all there.
Councilmember Ross.
I'm just wondering if we get the study done in March, we're going to sit on it then until 2020? Then before we can actually start making changes and whatever else the project entails?
We don't have a timeline. We want to inform the budget, but I do not see any scenario where there would be a pause in that council goal.
Right,
Now,
but we
there
don't
may
have the
be
money until
different
2020.
speeds that
Or-
these elements,
Or highly unlikely it would be completed by
highly
March.
unlikely, yeah. Now, if it's a
Right,
roadblock.
this time
we-
next year.
We would resolve the roadblock. But it's not like, oh, we did the study, okay, we're going to go golfing for 4 months. It's what's the next step immediately and march forward until the goals and objectives are met to the satisfaction of the council.
Right, but is there any chance that we'll have the study and then we need to start spending some of the money this next year? I mean, I wonder if we should increase it a little more than 75,000.
It is
Maybe it's
possible,
100 or
yeah,
125,000.
it's possible.
And then does it roll over to the next year, that amount?
The council would certainly have the option to roll over any balance. If you spent half of it, you could roll the rest over toward additional efforts. Yeah. Councilmember Sunwell?
So I guess my comment would be on $200,000 is the total number that the department came up with. I'll wait for Brian to stop talking because this is
Council members,
directed
if you could
toward
stop
him.
and not have
even though I'm
sidebars.
not supposed to say it's directed toward him. So the $200,000 is the budget you guys came up with to complete this thing, right? So whether we put 60 here and 140 there, you feel like it's going to cost $200,000 to do this thing. I am in no position to suggest that it won't. All we're doing by this motion, to those council members who are questioning the timing and stuff, and maybe reducing the amount, is the timing, right? And so what's been proposed is that let's bite off the study in 2019, which it sounds like we'd be lucky to have it done in the first half of 2019.
Correct.
And the rest of the money, it's not just a random number. That $200,000 is what you came up with to complete that portion of the project, right? And so the remaining $125,000 isn't just like, I wonder what that's going to cost. It's to complete what we think is probably going to take 18 months to get done anyway. And so I think we're just shifting the timing, and the $200,000 is what you need, period, whether it's all spent in 2019 or divvied up months 19 and 20.
I'll summarize. It's 200,000 approximately in the first year of 2019, because I don't want to be in front of you asking for an adjustment. It's a
Well, and hopefully you'll have
placekeeper in
enough
the form,
information from this.
spoken for, and we can go towards it. The timing of the effort will mandate when we spend it. I do not anticipate spending 200,000, but it is doable at that amount regardless of the decisions you make. If we get into it and it's more expensive, this has it covered.
And bottom line is $75,000 is enough to inform you as to whether $125,000 is ridiculous or whether it's all needed.
Correct, yeah.
All right. And that's where you have the comfort after the first year. Councilmember Lissay. And again, Council urges to wrap this up. It shouldn't be an affordable housing discussion tonight.
Ask you a couple questions about managing those dollars in. Is it easier for you to come back and ask for more money earlier or to defer money to the next year?
It's much easier to roll it over to 2020.
Is it easier for you to have a budget of $200,000 in 2019 and not spend it? Or to have a budget of $75,000 and have to ask for more money?
In the first scenario, I would not be before you until the mid-budget. So yes, it's better to have it.
So as the director of the
2019.
Community Development Department, and in my book, more of an expert in this issue than all of us, would it be more advantageous for your department to have a $200,000 allocation or budget for 2019 and then roll it over to 2020 in this scenario?
Yes, it's easier.
Okay.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're highly confident that 75,000 for the 19 will give you everything you need.
Mr. Mayor, that was not the question I was asking.
Well, I'm asking a different question.
Well, I was under the impression that my question was part of the council's discussion. I just don't like the idea that you're changing the topic when I was asking a question.
The mayor is fully free to be part of a council discussion, Councilman Riley, let's say.
Well, then I'll ask another question.
To answer the mayor's question, once we're at the study level, you as a council will know whether proceeding with the remaining budgeted amount is warranted or not.
Councilman,
Any dollars spent out of the $200, 200,000,
Correct.
right? So this is just us saying, you can probably have this. When you come back to us with this is what a study is going to cost, then we'll allocate the money. When you come back to us with this is what the study recommends, so this is what we need to go do, we allocate that portion of the 200, right?
As
Okay.
we go forward.
So I think I heard a little birdie in my ear that says we might be ready to call the question on this exhaustive topic.
did you just call the question?
I just heard somebody that might have had a second comment say that maybe I'd covered it.
No
So,
way.
no? Okay, I'm done with my question.
Councilman Lasay.
Would it be easier for you to manage your department, of which you were responsible for, with a budget of $200,000 in fiscal year 2019 than it is with a budget of $75,000 in 2019?
It would be easier. I don't imagine spending 200,000 in the first year, so it could carry over. But when we get to those discussions about what portion of 2019 carries over, that's a really relatively simple matter, as opposed to asking for new money, in which case staff will be asked, where are you taking it from?
Councilman Mayhew.
So I just want to say that having heard all this conversation, I'm no longer in favor of my motion. So I just want to let you know I'm planning to vote against it. I think that
You can withdraw it.
You can withdraw it if you want.
I think that the thing is, what we've heard, that the salient things in my mind are that what we've heard tonight are that there were many more requests for budget enhancements than the mayor felt were possible within our revenue stream. So we have to say no to things. And so what that tells me is that at best we're ending up with if we say yes to everything in here, we end up with a balanced budget, meaning there is no more money beyond this. And what I suspect is if we knock this money down, that there's a long list of things that are going to want to jump in and take that money. So the idea that we could knock it down now, and then maybe later when we discover something more, then give more money then, I don't think there will be any more money to give. I don't think that'll be possible. So especially the comments on, well, maybe we will finish this study before a year from now, maybe it's 6 or 9 months from now, wouldn't it be nice to move on into things? I've also heard the idea that, which is, I know to be true, which is that if they don't spend that whole $200,000 in year one of the biennium, it rolls over to the second year of the biennium. But it doesn't roll over if we've spent it somewhere else. So I think that we should actually fund the whole $200,000 as requested. I think it will absolutely get spent. I think the first 75, which we'll control, and we'll control when and how that gets spent. The first 75, or whatever the number ends up being, will be spent for the study. And the remainder we'll be able to spend on starting to implement things. I think we should do that. So I'm actually in favor now of what was requested and in the time periods requested, And so that's how I'm planning to vote.
So are you withdrawing your motion, Councilmember Mayhew?
Nope, I'm going to leave it there, but I plan
right.
to vote against it.
All right, and just so the council understands, kind of to Councilmember's comment earlier, I'm happy with either one of these scenarios. I think either one works. My interest is just making my council happy, getting the majority on board so we can
And
wrap it
moving
up
on.
and move on. Yeah. All right, any other comments on this, council? All right, so I'm going to vote on the amendment to the motion. All those in
Which
favor?
was?
Wait, yeah, repeat it.
The amendment to the motion was to allocate $75,000 in 2019 and the balance $125,000 in 2020
And Mayor, if you could clarify,
for a study in 19 with any other actions on.
if the council's vote was no, if it was.
We're going to go back to the original motion, which was just $75,000 with Councilmember Holloway, remind me, 0 in 2020.
And if the answer to that was also no, where would we end?
Then we'd be back to this, the mayor's budget.
Thank you.
Or another motion could be made.
That's not happening.
Or you can pull your motion.
All right.
All right.
All right, ready for the vote? All those in favor? All those opposed?
No?
Aye.
No.
All right, so we're back to the original motion. I don't think we need more further discussion. This is 75,000 in 19 with 0 in 20. That was your motion, correct, Councilmember Holloway?
That was, I'm not questioning.
To reduce the 200 to just 70?
I'm not questioning the motion, I'm questioning the procedure.
Okay.
Now that we are back to the motion, there is an opportunity for discussion on the original motion.
Oh, if you want further discussion, sure.
And maybe motion
Okay,
to revise the motion.
please, continue then.
No, that was point of clarification. I'm not making a motion. I'm just giving an opportunity for others if they want.
I should have just said if there's no objection for further comment, we'll move to vote on the motion. I just said that. All right, seeing no objection then, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
No?
No.
All right, so now we're back to the original mayor's budget, 200,019.
Which doesn't require a motion, we just go on.
We could just ready to move on.
Requires that we go to the
All
next.
I only had one more item, and then we could move on, and that's
I just want to say
services
a
and
quick note
supplies.
before we move on. It did strike me that $75,000 study is pretty close to a 1% increase in property taxes. And I'll object to my comment as being not germane and provocative, so I'll withdraw that.
If we're going to make not germane and provocative comments and withdraw, the tenor of this council is going to change. Okay?
Says Councilmember Germain and provocative. Wait, did I go there? Wait, I did.
The other line of importance is services and supplies is increased 28% into 2019 and then drops in 2020. Those primarily are update to our shoreline master program. Not only the one that we haven't completed, that rolls into our next one that's due June of 2019. The letter of map revision, the buyout development code amendments, and then various projects that make up that number.
So the Lomar update is what you're saying?
If we proceed, but it'll be in the budget, yes.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So I thought the Shoreline Master Plan had a grant.
Some cities do. The way I'll capture it is 3 or 4 generations of planner before me have worked on that project. Every planner through our desk have worked on it. It was never resolved. Working with David Pater at Ecology, he's agreed to let us finish up that effort as part of our check-in or not progressive, but periodic update that is not the major update. We're long past the deadline. The periodic update is June 2019. He's letting us merge that. We've been to Planning Commission. We heard their input. We need to reconstitute the city's Shoreline Hearings Board. Depending on what happens with budget and Salish, existing staff will be able to do that. We have Aaron Bowie with this year's budget informing the inventory. We plan on spending that money before December 31st. And then the budget starts again January 1st. And so part of this increase is to do the periodic update that's due June 2019.
What about grants, though? I thought we had grants for that.
At this point, to pause and even look at grants or even ask Ecology for a grant would be not productive. We're years overdue from our required SMP update. That opportunity was years ago. Not being here, I don't know that we took advantage of it or not. I can't answer that with accuracy tonight. But my guess is 4 or 5 years ago that opportunity was present. But what I do know is we have not adopted an SMP in those 4 or 5 years.
Councilmember Hussain?
I just want to mention, I appreciate the council members' desire to find funds to take care of it, but I think the director would be probably more accurately suited to use the word decades behind as opposed to years behind. This thing is almost approaching 20 years behind being updated. And we're woefully in errors with the state.
And I can say we're at one advantage, and that is that David Pater has not left his position.
Yeah.
He has the institutional history and knowledge that none of us have.
It was in detail reviewed when I was on Planning Commission last year, and it needs a lot of work.
Councilmember Mayhew?
So I think this is a question for the finance team, but I'm not sure. I'm just trying to follow the dollars and match them to the explanation. So I see 18 being 562,000. I see 19 being 725,000, which is a big increase. I see explanation of 3% growth, which is about 16, 17,000, I don't know, I think. And then something that described itself as a one-time increase. So maybe I'm not understanding what one-time increase means, because when I look at when I look at 20, we only go down 5%. So it's not a one-time expenditure. It's a permanent expenditure every year from now on. I'm just trying to understand what we're really saying. Should this actually be in an enhancement line? Is this a one-time thing or a permanent thing?
Yeah, it strikes me that there's another big project in 2020, another one-time project in 2020 that bumped that up as well. To a lesser degree.
Another part of the river.
That's just one of the four major bullets. There's 3 other bullets and 11 other assorted. The shoreline map.
The shoreline master plan update was $20,000 of that.
Okay, but what's the difference between 725 and 562? Many multiples of 20,000, isn't it? And so mainly what I'm getting at here is, it seems like if these are one-time, if it's 1 or 2 projects, whatever it is, they should be on the enhancement line, we shouldn't see this as being built into the ongoing budget.
And I think part of your question, it only drops 35,000 between 19 and 20, so what's the project in 20 that's
Yeah, what are the projects?
keeping the number up, or is it an ongoing?
Right, and then shouldn't we put it on a separate line item so that in 21, we see the budget dropping back down, because we're not going to permanently have these projects every year, I don't think.
Do you guys want to get back on that, or do you think you can find that information right now?
Yeah, we can find that information. I think the nature of the community development budget, and just as a policy decision, we could talk about how to fund this a little differently, but the nature of it is you have a lot of one-time plans just based on their work. So one bullet point I do apologize that we left out is like $20,000 for code updates. That's something that Mark and I talked about in his budget. We have that on the professional services generic line item, for example.
So Robert, Drew, can we do this? Like, I want to keep us moving here, so can we have you guys just give, whether it's just 4 or 5 lines of the major items, and as Councilmember Mayhew earlier said, maybe it's another 15 items that roll up as other miscellaneous. Just give those summaries with totals on each of those years of what are these one-time things making those numbers move around. We can email that out to the council for a follow-up.
Yeah, we'll do a small chart with that.
Yeah, that's fine, but could I also suggest you give some thought to, so I agree with everything you said, Mayor, and that addresses a lot of the question I'm raising, but could I also suggest you give some thought, my mind recalling the fire department budget where they had some equipment that they need, and they do need equipment every year, and we had some discussion around that, but their numbers were on this row called capital outlay. So I wonder if maybe we find a different row, maybe it's capital outlay, maybe it's some other, but maybe we call that out so we can see that, because these are one-time projects, and they may continue as you make the point there, but at least we would see them not as sort of a base budget called services and supplies. So give some thought to that. You don't have to answer now.
I just want to make a brief comment about that. That's part of the housekeeping that we're doing, because I am used to doing it that way in CD, and my predecessors set up individual accounts and accounts and accounts, and too many for the council to discuss tonight.
All right, so yeah, so
so
maybe
I
just
agree.
help us
I
see
agree,
that,
totally.
because if we could just get some visibility into that and then know what those couple projects are, as the mayor's suggesting, I think that'll help us understand what you're asking.
General idea without getting into the individual line item.
No, just, again, just don't get into 35 or 100 line items, just get into 4 or 5 major summary. What are the major points, and if there's a bunch of little ones, just roll those up into one line. So, no more than looking for no more than sort of 5 big summary lines, right? The 50,000 was discussed last time. I think you adjusted yourselves and said 15. I think anywhere from 10 or 50. Yeah, that's a little high, I think, but Councilmember Shepherd and Councilmember Holloway.
So when you do your email to kind of give us an understanding of what is happening, I'd like to see what happened between, say, 2017 and 2018, what made that delta drop in 2018. I think that would be interesting, just like the top item that really impacted, the numbers. But it does look like there's no constant trajectory, as Robert was saying. It's basically one-time expenses that can vary from year to year.
Yeah,
So this is a line where a lot of studies are coming in there, and they kind of ebb
Yeah.
and flow, yeah.
And we added the 17 line just to, per the council request last time, so I didn't, and if you want us to do differences between 17 and projected 18, we would add them, but that's why we didn't add them here, so. We can just give you an answer, we could just write you an answer on that.
Okay.
Rather than putting it in the chart. if that works.
Councilmember Holloway?
So, all right, budget, it's math. My son gets half point if he doesn't show his work. I need to see dollar figures. I agree, roll up the small stuff to other categories.
You just want a summary category with totals.
Well, I want to know what the effect are in the 2 years we're talking about and see that it adds up. That would save us a lot of time, because right now, a large part of this time is poking at this to find the math errors.
Yeah.
We
did
do the
discuss
work.
it.
You're
so
assuming that there's
uncover it.
errors,
Huh?
and, well, I think adding that line will show you that there's no errors. It's going to be,
Yeah.
this is the X amount, this is the X amount, here's the difference.
I'm looking for dollar figures 2019, 2020 associated with those bullets. And it all
Councilmember
should
Holloway,
add
I 100% understand
Okay.
what, we had discussions behind the scene to kind of we're getting there. We're going to keep fine tuning this until
Okay.
I want these to just roll smoothly. I'm trying to anticipate exactly what you guys are looking for.
Yeah,
so-
you show me that, I'm shutting up.
Okay. I think you've heard me already.
That's all it takes?
That alone will be motivation for everybody. So- No, I'm kidding.
Now,
I'm kidding.
you going to withdraw that one?
I will withdraw that. That was made totally playful. That was not made.
I know, I'm teasing.
Yeah, I think just kind of doing 5 major summary lines with the totals would be very helpful to keep these moving quickly, so. All right, any other questions on this line then? All right, let's move on, Martin.
That's all I have.
All right, so we'll get the follow-up on that to the
Announcements,
council
yeah.
then.
That was quick, good job.
Well, we kind of thought the affordable housing one might take a little time, so.
Who's up next?
Talk about building division?
PJ's got 5 minutes.
I have 5 minutes. I'll work with 5 minutes. I do have an update. The copy that council was given, and it's on me, did not include the 2016 and 2017 numbers, so I have this out that I will hand out afterwards. I will move this forward. So, my name is PJ Rodriguez. I'm the IT director for the city of Snoqualmie, and here is our proposed 2019-2020 information technology budget. So here's what we'll cover. Goals, we're going to look at department overview, and I want to just educate the council on how we build the budget.
Sorry, can I just, quick question. So this is an internal service fund we're looking at, or an operating fund?
It's the internal service fund for IT, which includes capital and operating, yes. And this is the fund that is allocated out to the department. So when we talk about internal service charges, this fund is actually allocated out
Right, so
citywide.
It's an important
it might-
distinction. Go ahead.
It's
Go
a
ahead.
very important distinction, and so we're actually talking about what we've actually grouped as a capital fund. So it might just be helpful for you just to slow down, just repeat what you just said, so make sure that we're all in tune with what's being presented, and also just help us understand that there's actually a fund balance involved here that's beginning and ending, and I don't know if that's part of the presentation,
It's
but at
part of
least
the
let us know that
presentation.
that's there.
Yep.
Yes, so again, this is a fund that the goal of the fund is to be self-sustaining,
So it's a revolving fund, right?
but
It's-
also just is similar to ER&R, be able to recoup the cost for computer replacement, equipment replacement citywide in the future, and make sure that PJ has the resources he needs to fund his department.
And so
Based
all
on
of
charges
this-
allocated out to other
all
funds.
of this expense that's going to be in here will end up being recharged out to the other departments, right?
That is correct.
Right, so its source of revenue comes from other departments, so to speak, and its revenue isn't directly from the general funds, it's from other departments indirectly, which makes, it's a different kind of fund than a.
And
you
just
hold
like
the-
cars, for example, just like funding for the fleet, there's a replacement schedule, same thing for hardware and software. So not just laptops, but for example, the ERP system, which PJ will discuss a little bit, where every year there has been some set aside and there's some savings for future costs. So it's taking in more at times than it spends based on the needs each year and based on the schedules each year. So very similar to ER&R in that respect.
Good. I just want to make sure everyone understood that this was a kind of different animal here.
Go ahead, PJ.
Thank you. So we'll go through the IT budget model, so how we build the budget, as Councilmember Mayhew has stated. That's through resource allocation, what are the funding sources, and then our strategic work plan for 2019 and 2020. And then we'll dive into the proposed budget, and then we'll have questions and answers.
Good.
All right.
They like answers.
So our goal is always a policy of sustainment. We want to make sure we're aligned to your goals and objectives. We have our own initiatives within IT that we map into your council goals and objectives. And of course, we want to make sure we also meet our department's needs and requirements. And whenever we can, we try to reduce the cost. We're not always successful in that, but we do try to do that. And maintain the same level of service as previously from the previous biennium. And then, of course, since we do provide external services to other agencies, we want to make sure there's good oversight on our cost in there. I'm not going to read this. This is basically our overview. Council can review this.
Your internal missions and.
Correct, yeah. Our core services, we divided into basically 5 different major areas: infrastructure, continuity services, personal computing services, communications, and professional technology services. And there's a deeper dive into that, how we build our service catalog. It's based off of those core services. So if you look in here, this is actually our core services in here. So we have a pretty mature service catalog within the IT infrastructure, and this is how we charge back. This is how we actually allocate resources and costs amongst the department. Performance measures, this was a little bit of a challenging slide for us. We have so many. We didn't know what really council might want to see. We measure a bunch of stuff. So we broke it down into 5 major areas: operations, incident management, and security. The other 2 items there, cost and time savings, we would like to measure those. We don't have a good model in place to be able to measure those effectively. Same thing with customer experience. It's difficult to really measure those items because it's IT. So next, so these are some of our performance measures. We have a lot of them. We chose a couple of them to show to council over here. This basically relates to incoming tickets, service level agreements, whether we violate those SLAs. The next one is basically still open tickets, active requests. What are we actually doing? Any escalations? What's open? Timelines, when was it completed? That type of thing.
And this is particularly pertinent when it comes to the contract with Duval to make sure you're meeting.
Absolutely, yeah. Correct, yeah. This is the organizational chart for IT. We have and we'll dive more into the IT project manager position. It is a term-limited position, and the purpose of this position, it's currently unfilled. The purpose of it is to really deliver 3 major systems for the city, and that is replacement finance software, enterprise records management, and the expansion of asset management for the city. So this is in 2011, we developed a document to kind of create a framework on how we're going to build our technology budget. And the reason being is in 2011, we started to acquire some expensive capital software and hardware. And we know that some point into the future, we would be replacing these items. So we wanted to put into paper how we're going to do that. So this is the document that we developed to kind of help guide us through that path. Finance helping here, I think Jerry was really one of the key folks that kind of helped us develop this particular document. So from a graphical standpoint, if you look at the technology budget from the ground up, how we divide it in terms of chargebacks, this is the method that we use. We have three major components underpinning that technology budget. That's core services, essentially what's the cost of your employees, right? And then capital are divided into two separate areas, right? They're either shared amongst all the departments in the entire city or department-specific capital. We don't want to charge, for example, Spillman, which is a CAD system for the police department. We don't want Public Works paying for that. So we want to make sure we allocate those appropriately.
Versus an email server back here.
That is utilized by everybody.
All the departments, yeah.
That is correct. Right, and then we have the operation side of things. And in that operation side, again, we divide it into department-specific and then shared services. And above that, we cover components and hardware and software maintenance. So that's one lens of looking how we build a technology budget. And we also look at a rolling 5-year average of how each department utilizes technology resources. And these are hours. These are resource hours. So this one is a 5-year rolling average because we didn't want spikes up and down when we start doing chargeback across departments. And then here's another lens to look at it. This is what actually feeds the technology budget, right? Again, from the ground up again, we have the technology reserves on the left-hand side. And on top of that, again, in 2011, we built these reserves, and these are very specific, either capital items or specific shared systems, the financial system, permit system. Again, these are large capital acquisitions that we decided we're going to have to save some money for these items at some point in the future, depending on what that life cycle is. We know that we're going to replace them, and you'll see that this year, that some of those bills are coming due.
Councilmember Somo?
Is this essentially like the ER&R fund for you guys?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep. Except we delineate every single major system. Okay. And the items that are not in green right here, asset management, records management, SCADA systems, these are recently acquired systems that, wow, pizza.
Yeah, that's a first.
Sorry, I had to stop there.
This is being videotaped, you know that, right?
They ate the dinner for me, so I didn't get a dinner.
That could have something to do with your arrival time. I'm not sure.
Which was 1 minute before the meeting started.
Whatever you say, Spicoli.
Go ahead, PJ.
Anyways, so
It's not germane.
15
it's
minutes.
not germane to the topic. In this particular, there's 3 items, that reserves that we want to activate at some point here in the 2019-2020 budget, because we know that, again, at some point, we're going to replace these systems. And I want to point out on the internal, again, these are the departments that then we charge back within the city. And then we have general fund and enterprise departments, and then we have one external source, and that's the city of Duval. For the biennium, they are budgeted to provide the city about $236,000 in revenues. Any questions on this? Yes.
So again, back to my earlier question. So the technology reserves, we made a decision, you said a few years ago, to create reserves. So as part of the other departmental budgets, are they like ER&R, are they kicking in a certain amount of budget every year to feed those technology reserves?
That's correct.
Okay. So
Yep.
that is an ongoing source of income. How does that differ from internal?
So these are operational side. These are basically your ER&Rs right here.
So that's your tech.
Correct. So we draw in these items if, for example, we're replacing existing systems. But if we're acquiring new systems, typically in the past, the department funds that initially, and then the following year, we then start doing chargebacks.
Okay, so if you were going to buy a new system, it would come under the internal
That's correct.
thing,
Yep.
right? And then the ongoing, the eventual replacement of that, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years down the road, comes out of the technology reserves.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
By the way, you get the award for the easiest to understand PowerPoint presentation.
Oh,
so far.
thank you.
It was a low bar, but you have done a very good job.
I don't know if I should. I don't know how to take that.
Don't take it as sincere.
Yeah, I can see that. I will move on. Thank you. So again, a part of our budget also is our strategic work plan, and this is essentially how, these are the items that we're going to do in 2019 and 2020. Right? So, and we map these to, on this side, I know it's kind of hard to see, on this side is basically the underpinnings of our initiatives within technology. And then on the left-hand side is the council goals and objectives. And we try to map those initiatives to the council goals and objectives. They don't always fit right, but they do somewhat fit. And so each of the work plans that we have are mapped to each of those goals and objectives and to each of the initiatives that we have. And then we have metrics on each of them. We have the departments, and then we have the actual, the timeline on when we plan to start. We don't have the, again, this is a plan. It's not, please don't view this as the end-all, be-all, that this is when we're going to start, because it is subject to change. And this is just the second page of that. This is just another page of that. This is a different view of that work plan. This work plan, again, is based on timeline. So you see where we move as we move through the biennium, right? See where we're going to start, where we're going to end with the type of, our goal is to finish all these items at the end of the biennium. Any questions on this?
Could you quickly point to the major ones that are causing the need for the
Yes. So one of the
time-limited FTE? Yeah.
So the big ones are here's the enterprise records management system and the finance software. Those are the two big items that's really going to drive the project manager position. Our goal is to really deliver those two systems, and then expansion of the asset management. Does that make sense?
Councilor
Yes.
Shepard?
So my understanding of definition of enterprise is it has 1,000 users. Is that right?
No, enterprise is essentially any system that encompasses your enterprise.
Complexity.
Yeah, yeah, correct.
We don't have any opportunity to go share that kind of system with other cities, right?
Well, so we do, in some instances, do that. For example, my building permit is a shared system. It is which feeds into our permitting system. So that's a shared system that we pay into. But as far as sharing particular actual,
PJ,
like our,
there are some record systems that you might want to point to, police and fire. They have a.
Oh, sure. So our CAD system, our computer-aided dispatch for fire, is shared through NORCOM. So that's a shared piece. For Spillman, which is for police, that is shared with Issaquah. We still pay the licenses, but it's housed in a different location. It's not always perfect, but it saves the city some funds.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, any more questions on this? All right, so we'll start with this, and I'll hand the proposed budget summary that includes 2016 and 2017. Again, I apologize. So here it is.
PJ, didn't we already allocate you the money for those 3 systems that you want to buy? The 3 white systems, the ones that were in white?
Yes, those have already been purchased.
Perfect, okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Thank you. So I know there are some large numbers in here, and we'll go through each and every one of these so that council has a good understanding. I heard some chuckles there. So personnel services is the first big one. I will ask finance on this for help. But here's a couple explanations. There is the IT project manager in here. We didn't hire this position yet, so we haven't expended the funds in 2018. We do have the applicants already, and we are reviewing those applicants. And it was approved by council on Agenda Bill AB 17191, and along with through the budget ordinance 160. And again, the deliverables are finance, software, records management, and asset management. So now I will entertain questions on this.
So that's the principal reason for a big jump from 753 to 919. And because it's a 3-year temporary position, you can see this going through 2021, correct?
Correct, yes.
Any questions, council? All right, continue, PJ. Go ahead, Councilmember Mayhew.
Just trying to formulate how to ask it. So, so the records, so I'm just trying to focus on these 3 systems that this project manager would be focused on delivering. So the records management piece, I imagine, is pretty significant. And I'm trying to understand what, and I'm not trying to go too deep into, I understand that you've gone through this and there's an agenda bill and this is approved. I'm just trying to understand what benefits to the city are going to come out of that. What are we trying to achieve with that? Just high, don't try and tell me the whole thing.
Sure.
PJ, you're going to get to that with outcomes or performance measures, or?
No, so we will go through through each of the enhancements, and then that might be a better place to discuss those specific.
I'm trying to ask a different question, but
okay.
So now I'm just going to have to make a whole bunch of assumptions if I can, So, finance software is something I have some experience with implementing. And the cost of the IT department, frankly, is usually not the biggest cost. The biggest cost is in personnel costs in the finance department. And so, in trying to sort of digest this big, giant, this number, there's a bunch of questions flying through my head, like, well, when are we going to do that? And I hope we're not trying to do that in the near future, because they don't have the capacity to do this. And then I think about records management, and maybe that's a big thing, because if that's going to help us with this massive number of public records requests we've learned about, then I would understand that. I'm just so you know, if you go back one slide, I'm starting from I almost choked my pizza up. It's a big, big number.
Sure. Right
at the bottom there.
Yep.
And so I'm just trying to kind of work back through that. So the thought that's in my mind is not so much whether you need, there's one other big thought going through my mind, which is, gee, a whole year has passed, and we didn't kick off evidently any of those 3 projects, which sort of kicks around in my mind, well, are we sure these are urgent then if we were able to live with them for a whole year? So I'm just sort of trying to get a beat on this, and I just have a bunch of questions about, as I've just sort of shared.
Sure.
So if you could maybe put all that in a little more context, and if your answer is wait and we'll see that, then I'll wait, but that's kind of, I just want to get a sense of where I'm coming from.
So I can, respond to the waiting a whole year in here. Really, we didn't have a finance director for a bit of time. We didn't see the need to bring in this particular position when the whole drive for this position was to deliver a product.
By a bit of time, he means ever in the history of the city of Snoqualmie. By saying we don't have a finance director for a bit of time, he means ever in the history of Snoqualmie until now did we not have a finance director, so.
Oh, because that a different title?
Yeah.
It's the first time we've ever had a finance director, so. Well, it used to be like a city treasurer before, we've just grown to where now we have a
Right,
finance
I
director.
see, yes, I see.
I'm sort of teasing about that.
Okay.
Sorry for the
So
delay.
essentially, there was a little bit of a gap there where we brought on board a new finance director, and we were attempting to then, he needs to get the lay of the land and make sure that this is something that he wants to do for the finance department. So we didn't want to just move forward with this position without talking to the finance director. So as far as the records management, so this is near and dear to the city clerk's heart, and she can probably articulate it better than I do, but we do have a need for a centralized records management system. In how we do records in the city is still a bit antiquated, and we are essentially going through the files in the back, searching for things. Nothing's electronic.
So I thought you'd say that, and just without making you belabor that, just.
Sure.
Would it be a reasonable thought in my mind that, similar to the comment I made about a finance system, that even putting this system in still doesn't mean that all of the records are yet into that system, and that may be a very sizable project on its own if we wanted to feed back years of records into that? That would be another project that's probably beyond. You're about setting up a system and getting it up and running, and the rest would be something beyond that. Is that fair?
Yeah, that would be a fair assumption, in that the whole goal, in my mind, of the technology project manager is to do some analysis, bring the system up online, and then work with the departments on how we can populate the system, right?
Got it. Okay, so then just so you don't have to, I'm assuming the asset management is a relatively smaller of those three.
Correct.
Okay, so the thought the big thought going through my mind is that, so if I just take the 2 million at the bottom of the 19 column, 1.1 million at the bottom of the 18 column, I assume that am I correct in assuming that basically that 900,000,
yeah.
900,000, is being allocated out to the departments. And so when we've seen those department budgets, they have each a piece of about a $900,000 increase. Is that a roughly reasonable belief?
So a portion of that is coming out of reserves, the technology reserves.
Oh, out of what?
Yeah, out of the technology reserves.
Not the ER&R.
Their ER&R.
Yeah. So you have an IT reserve fund, which
We do.
will.
That's correct.
I see. Can you give me ballpark how much of that 900,000 is coming out of their fund balance as opposed to getting charged out to other departments?
If I move to to each of these, I'll be able to articulate that probably a little bit better. It would make much more sense. Thank you.
Councilmember
I'll
Simonet.
wait, he's going to move through each.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is, any more questions on this piece here?
Yeah, so there's about $166,000 delta between 18 and 19, and I don't think all of that is tied up in your head count. Or is it?
I will defer to finance on this particular item.
Should be. Adult personal services.
So 166 is what's going to take to bring someone in to do that?
So the salary range of the position is from 90 to about 100K, so 85 to 100K. And then I think if you add benefits.
Plus you have 7 employees, so you have to cover for cost of living increases, so you got.
Sure.
So you have your 3% or your, whatever it is, 3.8%? What do we do? 5?
Call it 5%.
Well, the new position's approximately $150,000.
Oh, okay. Well,
Total
that answers
person
my
cost
question.
with salary and benefits.
So that's the fully loaded cost.
Okay, my question's done.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Holloway, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, but, so if I do a 5% cost of living on 2019, that's about $38,000, which leaves you $127,000 for the PM. If you're telling me it's 150, you're 25K short.
I don't believe we plan on hiring at
By the time you
top.
hire, yeah. Plus, by the time you hire, you're not hiring in January 1. There's a delta there for weeks or months.
And again, healthcare was lower, so it was 3.3% increase for healthcare. The rest of it was 5. We lowered the healthcare because we got those rates in, and they were 3.3%.
Again, if you show me the numbers, I shut up, but go ahead.
Sure. Okay. I will move on. Okay, so service and supplies, the increase, again, this is a 43% increase.
Councilmember Holloway?
Didn't work.
Go ahead.
43% increase, and we've isolated in here kind of where those numbers are coming from. These are not the exact sum. We should have put some others in here that would then add up to this increase in here, right? But it's, but that's where you can see the majority of the increase.
This is more of what you are looking for, right? For each, as you go through these lines, just sort of a summary of the large numbers in this Councilmember Mayhew said, and one more line that rolls up a dozen or 2 items into miscellaneous other small items with a total. Councilmember Holloway, is this what you're kind of after to us?
Well, I was looking at, Pete, there's a number missing which would make me happy, but it's below my tolerance level to worry about. But I'm just trying to understand the interfund support general increase of 100,000. You're getting administrative support external to the ID department, and you're funding back?
Yeah, so internal services, at some point, the charges have to stop, otherwise we just keep charging each other. So, fine.
I wasn't going there, but I was just...
So,
Chargeback, that's all it is.
yeah, this is a chargeback, not by us, but from administrative services for support that general fund provides for us.
So they're taking money from you?
Yes.
Not the other way around?
Correct. So we do have those, like Fleet also charges money from.
I'll ask Bob to speak to that. You want to describe that? What do you mean by that, Bob?
No, he's got it. I mean, just.
Yeah, you're charging.
But what, I understand why you're charging a department. I don't understand why the administration or whatever is charging you. Like, what did you do?
We provide support to IT.
So they do our payroll. So this is like an overhead cost. We use vehicles, so we have to pay for those services as well.
Part of why we did that allocation, or why the city started doing that, was when the 1% went into effect and everybody was in a crisis because they couldn't keep up with inflation. Then one of the mechanisms they could use was to rightly allocate all activities that were done to support utilities and shift that toward utilities.
They get a part of Bob's, I mean, all the overall arching services you provide to everybody, they benefit from too, and so therefore you're charging them for legal and HR. And okay, I get that.
And I believe even the invaluable service that the mayor and council provide.
Especially the mayors is what I heard.
The basic way to summarize this too is, I don't know if this pretty small font from way back here, but instead of an internal service fund, we have the administrative overhead in the general fund. So again, Jody's time, Bob's time, the mayor's time, finance department, HR's time, and then it's allocated out. So if that's the general fund, finance and admin support, then it's spread out to all other funds, and every fund has a piece of that administration, including the internal service funds.
Councilmember Mayhew, then Councilmember Ross.
So I have a question, but before I do that, I would just make the comment that this kind of allocation is, in the accounting world, we spend an enormous amount of time on the theory and practice of doing this, and the practice can be very, very simple, or it can be extraordinarily complex. So, for example, if you were at Boeing, you would have an unbelievable complexity of this sort of thing. So, but there is a policy decision here for us, or collectively for the city, which is whether you make, for example, this particular allocation that we're talking about, or whether you don't. Because it takes time for the finance people to do this. And the reason you would or wouldn't do it has to do with how accurate you want to be in truly understanding the cost of what you ultimately deliver. So by saying we're going to take the cost of, let's just say, the payroll department, allocate it here, so we allocate it across the whole city based on the number of employees or some related type of metric. And then, so now we know the true cost of the IT, of this IT department, including running their payroll for them. And then that gets allocated out to the ultimate users. It's just a degree of accuracy that we get that would be less accurate if we didn't do that. We just have a big lump left in this department called administrative, or we'd have to figure out some other way to allocate it out, which would be less precise. So it's all about the complexity is trying to produce precision for us. And so what we can decide is, hey, it's too complex, don't do that. Or we can say, got it, actually we do like that precision. So I just want to make that comment, that there's no rule that says how complex you have to be, other than you ought to be reasonably accurate, and that's a judgment call. So, but I think that historically, the council hasn't been brought into this as much, so I think it's fantastic that we're asking these questions and getting this greater understanding. The question that I have.
I'm sorry, Councilman.
Am I okay?
Continue. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Can I ask my?
Yeah, please continue.
Yeah, okay, so my question though is, on this $111,000 increase, so we're looking at a base number of 300,000, so we're getting a 33 whatever percent increase, assuming that's 100% of that line, which I doubt it is. So this is an enormous increase. I wonder if someone could tell us why such a big increase to the IT department, you know, kind of what are the couple big drivers, what's causing that?
If the council recollects, we did call this out on a couple of the slides last week, and a lot of that, the increase in positions, the assistant city attorney position, the new position in finance as well, those allocations are increasing it. So when we added positions of finance, we put that into the calculation model. It gets spread out, so that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the new administrative position.
So why don't we see a similar hit in the other departments?
We did. We spread it out. And
because I don't remember us talking about that before. Like in fire and police. Well, we didn't see in police.
It was rolled up is the problem, I think.
But 100,000, I mean, it should have popped on every department, unless somehow this is disproportionate.
Disproportionate, that's correct.
So the thought going through my mind is it can't be that IT disproportionately uses lawyers.
So I think Councilmember Holloway has proposed
Ever since PJ took over.
basically to craft a reconciliation schedule for each operating budget. I think we can definitely call out the administrative charges and the differences between last year versus this year. I think given maybe some of the cost drivers that we were using this time around as opposed to last year, that may reflect differently across all the different operating budgets. So indeed, you mentioned one cost driver, which was FTE. Another one that we're using is 2017 expenditures and so on. It's a predetermined chargeback rate too. So generally, typically at the end, we would want to adjust for that to actually reflect actuals for this year. So as of right now, we're just budgeting, but.
So please do not go break out this on every department. I definitely am not asking for that, or please don't do that because of anything I'm asking for. But if you could help us understand what happened here in this department in particular, or somewhere in the future, because I'm suspicious that we've done something with, I thought it might be something with our allocation method, our drivers. Mm-hmm. And so I think you've confirmed that. And what I'm wondering now is, could we have done something that if we look at it, we're actually going to decide somehow we got a bad outcome? Because like I said before, it doesn't seem to me that the IT department would be a disproportionate user of legal or accounting, HR, you know, the things, the drivers you're saying. So I'm suspecting something happened in the allocation method that we might want to go back and relook at.
I have the spreadsheet up. One thing that one of the things I worked on when I started here was looking at the way we spread allocations, and so we did do some housekeeping. We're continuing to do housekeeping because we're assuming it was set up correctly in the past, and that's part of the problem. Like in ER&R, that's part of the problem that we're having. So that's just part of our quality control that we're doing as a department, and so that's why you're seeing some of these changes happen. It's taking a fresh look at it. And again, like Drew was explaining how we're looking at the actuals, what are people actually utilizing? How many, and you can go into the nitty gritty with this, how many agenda reports, how much work, how many, legal services each department are taking. And so we're looking at those times.
All right, well, maybe one other thing you could just give us a thought, because in my mind, I'm having a hard time thinking about how am I ultimately going to understand what our budget increases, where they went. So I think the attorney, whoops, IT guys? I think our attorney.
That's what happens when you don't approve his budget.
Like I was saying, budget approved.
That's quick.
No, so I'm trying to think about how we're going to, so I think the city attorney addition was in the range of how much?
175.
175. And so, but here I see 111, which is going to then flow out in recharges. And I just, like, which should mean the 175 goes back down because of the recharge. I'm just trying to figure out how am I going to see this ultimately in the budget and understand where the actual external expenditure increase is.
I'm going to undo my own policy of going to line item, but in this case, I do want to demonstrate the budget for the internal service fund before we reevaluated it was $8,600 only for this fund, and it's a large fund, and so it was being under allocated.
Okay, so it's not really, I shouldn't think about the increase in the other departments. It's just a correction of an allocation methodology.
Correct.
So then would it be more accurate to believe that the 111,000 or a big chunk of that, largely most of it, is going to be a decrease in other departments?
Right, or, well, being careful with the word decrease because we did add positions, but it's going to be less of an increase for other departments because we're increasing this one more proportionally.
Right, so but all things being equal, this is really more being allocated here and less elsewhere.
Right, increase in allocation is less elsewhere than it is here, yes.
Okay.
So if I'm adding positions, say I'm adding 3 positions or 4 positions, and we weren't charging this fund
But that's
enough-
not the bulk of this. What you're telling me, the bulk of this, what I should understand is the bulk of this is
the total
fixing the
services,
methodology.
right, exactly, fixing the
All right,
methodology of
and
the total services.
that part would be offset by equal offsetting lower amounts in other departments. That part, that is
Correct.
related to the methodology change.
Correct, but again, overall, the overhead increased because of the proposed increased positions that we've built in.
Yeah, but we've already understood those when we understood your department's budget.
Yes.
Right?
and
So we don't need to
city attorney.
re-understand those.
Right.
So this thing is a matter of understanding you changed the methodology and it's just offset elsewhere.
That is correct.
Got it.
Councilmember Sunwell.
So the 111 is mostly a one-time true-up, which is why 2020 shows the standard 3.4%. So we think this is a quote-unquote one-time true-up.
It is. Again, we have to do a little bit more evaluation of the cost allocation, but we're going to do that every year because we're going to monitor every year what the.
It's not a
actuals are for
one-time
each department.
charge, it's a permanent charge, it's just the increase
It's a
is
one-
one
it's a-
time.
Right.
Says,
He means
yeah,
one-time
one-time.
true-up and then it stays there.
Yeah, it's a
Delta's
true-up.
one time.
Yeah.
Well, and in part, how you allocate it is a philosophy.
Councilmember Holloway?
Sorry. How you allocate that is a philosophy question, and that will change over time. So what you're seeing here is you've changed the philosophy under
policy.
which you, well, no, it's a philosophy, it turns into a policy, but you've changed it and you're truing up IT to do that. That doesn't mean you won't change your methodology later. I'm just saying, 5 years from now, we may be right back here.
Okay.
All right. Ready to continue?
All right, so this is the capital outlay, which of course has the biggest increase. And we want to show council on why that increase is happening. Again, I want to reiterate that we do have reserves that we're proposing to fund from for these projects. And in this table right here, you can see the departments that are impacted by these particular projects, and then the cost on 2019 and then on 2020. So we broke that down. Again, please take into account that this doesn't true up exactly to this piece. but it's close. We're showing you in here what we call the highlight, the big ticket items that we plan on implementing in 2019 and 2020.
No pencils.
No pencils. We're digital. So again, the biggest one that we have here is the Springbrook refresh, which is the ERP system. This is finance, and we're estimating this cost to be approximately $450,000. And this is based off of recent implementations from multiple jurisdictions that we've spoken with. For example, Issaquah started with about $500,000 to $750,000. They are still implementing the system. That was 3 years ago. So if that gives you an idea, we hope not to be in that boat, obviously. We want to make sure we wrap it up within 2 to 3 years, but that's the kind of scenario we're in.
Councilmember Summerall.
So you're asking for half of it now? You said it was going to cost $450. I only see $225 up there.
Well, 2 years.
I can add now.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can I make some comments? I just wanted to talk to the council a little bit about the need for the new IT system. I know this got brought up at the last workshop. I won't spend too much time on this, and we can bring this to further discussion at FNA in a future meeting if we need to. So the best analogy for our system right now is it's probably like a 1992 Ford. It's still running, but it's not the top of the line system. So I have worked on, there's pretty much 3 steps to IT systems out there for an organization of our size. One is still on a green screen, and I've used that one. This is kind of the middle of the road, and it's fun. It's lots of fun.
3270 screens can be fun.
They're fun. And then the new one is more intuitive and it's web-based. And the thing about the new one is, say you have a council question, we want to, punch out a list of everything that makes up a line item. I can do that in 30 seconds on a new system. It's very easy. It's very intuitive. You just run it. Here, it takes us research, and we have to program the system, run a report, reformat it, and that takes staff time. And so there's a lot of staff time involved, and the budget component of this is also a good piece. Most of the new systems have an integrated personnel services budget, position budgeting, where you enter in the inputs, you enter in, okay, I want to run a scenario of 3% for services, or 3% of healthcare costs, or I can run it at 5%. I can immediately punch it out, show the council, instead of doing it manually. So there's a lot of functionality. It saves money over time. You can quantify that just based on the amount of work hours it needs right now to produce special reports than it would be with the new system out there. And I know because I worked on both of them, and just the time savings is amazing. For example, this budget process, we're still using spreadsheets. We have a budget module available to us in Springbrook. It's pretty clunky, so to speak, and it still doesn't do the real-time functionality we need. So a new system, once we get there, and again, it's labor-intensive, as PJ explained, also as Councilmember Mayhew explained, it's very labor intensive to get done because we actually have to sit down with the programmers eventually and go line item by line item the budget and make sure all the history is loaded in correctly, everything is processed correctly. But it is, in my opinion, and my recommendation, at least at this point, worth the time when we get there. And starting the process sooner than later is necessary. I don't think the finance department's going to be tied down yet until probably 6 to 12 months in the process is when we'll start our more participation. Hopefully by then we'll get some of our other work out of the way that we'll be able to better allocate our resources to this project. But I do believe it's a very important procedure to streamline our processes in the finance department.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So where's the records management?
So this is on the base budget. The records management is considered an enhancement. We don't have that system yet. So it will be on a different slide.
So we just, quick time check, we have 7 minutes for one slide.
Yeah. Go ahead, PJ.
Well, then we have a whole other department to go through.
No, we don't.
We're not going to get to parks
We
tonight.
have,
Good.
Okay.
I don't understand. So I have a question. Are we just going to stop and I should hold it to next session, or?
We're going to stop at 7:25 and then take a break and then start at 7:30 on the Salish.
So should I ask my question?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I just want to understand, I'm wondering, so I understand, this is a question for the finance director, but primarily, I think. and I understand that you inherited these internal service funds in the status that they're in. So I'm not trying to ask you to defend what's there. I'm just trying to understand your philosophy going forward. My understanding of internal service funds is that the fund balances that you build up, so this is whether it's the equipment, the ER&R, the vehicles, or whether it's this fund, that what you are doing is taking all of your existing systems, looking out at their useful lives, and then looking at the expected replacement cost, and then you are building into your charge-out rates such that when you get to that expected retirement date, you will have the money to replace.
Right. So they're very similar to the fleet. Right.
Right? So then anything that we are adding or changing wouldn't come out of that fund. We would have to fund that somewhere else. So if the police department has 20 vehicles, the fund would make sure that we'll always have 20 vehicles for them. But if we wanted to add vehicles, that wouldn't come out of that fund. We'd have to bring that money in, but then you'd run the fund from that. Say we brought in 5 more vehicles, you'd then run the fund from that point forward to replace 25. Am I getting this right?
That's correct.
So with that in mind, my question is, are all of these consistent with that? And like, I look at this 450,000 for Springbrook. Yeah, that seems to me to be something that's above and beyond as opposed to normal replacement. But just, is this consistent with that philosophy, or do we have some things that you're going to have to work out to get this fund? Are we already consistent with that, or we're not yet consistent with that?
In other words, we've already been tucking money away every year
Yeah,
for
so
Springbrook.
let me explain this. We do have a formula for each of our enterprise systems that we allocate and look at that life cycle and project what that cost will be. We do add an inflationary figure on there depending on the system. And this is one of those systems that we have. The shared systems, when we built these, what we call these reserves, it was originally part of the shared system that we have. We decided to pull that out because we realized it's a big enough system. The shared system reserves in this particular financial system reserves has enough in that total fund balance that it has to cover this entire all this project.
This 450 then, consistent with what I was saying before, 10-year life cycle.
Yeah.
So we're getting to the end, we're coming up on the end of the 10-year cycle, and therefore over the last 10 years, we've actually been putting aside this money. That's why it's there.
It's since 2000, I don't want to say over 10 years because we learned our lesson starting in 2011 that we need to sock money away, knowing that these replacements are coming. So whenever there was extra, we started putting money into these reserves.
Okay, but are we now then just consistently every year, we have a schedule and we just
That's
fund
correct.
that schedule?
Absolutely.
So it's not tucking away anymore, now it's planned?
It's correct. It's planned. So there's a charge back. We send out a spreadsheet to finance every biennium that states this is what you should charge back for these items for each department
And it
based
says
on our
when they're going to be
calculation.
replaced, and it's all,
Absolutely.
all right, and this is all consistent with that?
It is all consistent with that.
Thank you.
So I think your questions pertain to the next slide as well, but I do want to make sure we have time to get to that. We have about 2.5 minutes left. Councilmember Lassay, please keep that in mind.
Yeah,
So at least we have
it's 2 questions, but I'll ask them really quick. So my understanding, because source funding is IT reserves, is this coming just from a reserve fund then, as opposed to asking for new money allocations, just asking to be used this way?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure I understood.
That's correct.
And the second one is probably a little more complicated, but there's a lot of outlay in the next 2 years.
Correct.
Are we to expect then that similar sort of outlay maybe in 21, 22? Or is it going to, using the spring back?
Yep.
And then as we hit the 5-year cycle or 7-year cycle or 10-year cycle, it'll come up. So our wave will be a little more like this.
Yeah, so the way we have this is based off of your life cycle on each of these equipment, right? So typically on servers, for example, those acquisitions are 4 to 5 years. So you'll see that ramp up. And after this, it'll be
In
4
other words,
years.
there's other assets you're not seeing here that are going to come up on their life cycles.
There may be others, yes, but these are biggies. I mean, are we?
These are huge,
Are we,
yes.
so 21, 22 might have some items that need to be replaced, but we're not going to be in the same, maybe not the same cost category.
You definitely won't have a financial system that needs to be replaced at that point, right?
And for those items then, so the final thing I'll say is, for those items then, it's similar to this, you're socking away money into reserves to make sure those are accounted for.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, so we have about 30 seconds to go over enhancements.
So these are enhancements in,
Unless you got other things after that, I think we should maybe cut it at the enhancements and
Yeah,
pick it
we
up on Monday night.
don't have our planner here yet either, so.
We could
that's
pick,
part of it.
well, no, we're not going to get to Parks and the,
No, I'm talking about Jason.
Jason's not here.
If you continue with IT, I'll do a check.
oh, I
Let's
got
finish
you.
this slide if we can.
I got you. Yeah, okay, well, let's just, sorry, Terry and Rach, we may be a little delayed of waiting on Jason here.
so again, so same scenario in here. We broke down all these enhancements, which department they're benefiting, and what the cost is between 2019 and 2020. A couple of these items just, we need to refresh our audio-visual here. There's talks about, you guys keep pulling your mics. We want to get wireless mics for everybody so that we can reconfigure this room a bit easier. Changing it to HDMI on the connections. City clerk, this is where we look at the enterprise content management system. Again, we anticipate this 50 and 50. It's not the end of the spending for this particular system in 2019 and 2020 because this is an ongoing, project. So we anticipate this to happen again in 2021. Legislative management software, this is replacing the current software that we have right now. We want to move towards something that's a little bit more sustainable and supportable. Right now, your IT creates, manages, develops that particular system. We feel we don't have that capacity to do that now. It's lasted us about 10 years. So I think it's...
We were way ahead of everybody else when we launched
Yeah.
that, but now we're way behind.
2004.
Yeah, so someone else can code better than I can out there. City clerk, public records, this is primarily all encompassing all our text messages, websites. We want to be able to archive those for immediate public records request responses.
Let me just do this. I'm going to pause here. Are there any of these items that are a red flag for council members or concerns? Are these all pretty clear?
Very low dollar, yeah. That's,
Okay.
Well, I just have a general question of, I guess it's a two-part, is how much is in the IT reserves, and should some of this be out of the IT reserves versus a special enhancement?
So in other words, what's this being paid with?
If we
How we
did, if we
affording
did
this? Yeah.
Springbrook out of IT reserves, why aren't we doing the content management system out of IT
And you'll
reserves?
want to look at a fiscal forecast.
Because-
and also stand- Are you done, Councilmember Holloway?
Good.
Okay, Sunwall and then Mayhew.
So I think the answer to that is because these are new items, right?
Correct.
Whereas Springbrook is a refresh. We have Springbrook now.
Yes.
It's an upgrade.
Correct.
So just like we're upgrade cars, we're not adding a new car, we're upgrading one we already have, whereas these are adding new cars. I
And then we
think.
have to start allocating monies.
And then we'll allocate for those, yeah. If they are things that you regularly update.
So these
I mean,
are new-
microphones may
yeah.
not fit into that group, but
So these are new acquisitions that we didn't have reserves for. So obviously, in the future, we would probably we would include some of these items into a shared system reserve so we can start charging those back.
You would build these into a replacement schedule.
Correct, into a replacement schedule.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, just 2 points. One on that point, I would just say I would advise us, it's really important if we're going to use internal service funds, which we are, which I think is fantastic, and absolutely what we should be doing, in my opinion. But if we're going to use this, what's critical to these functioning effectively is that you never misuse them, meaning you never go into those fund balances for anything that you didn't put money, allocate money into it to fund. Because as soon as you do it, the whole thing breaks down. Because remember, you've been allocating to departments over a number of years. So you take money that you were charging, let's say, to the police department, and suddenly you use that to build something for the community development department. It means all your years, you're actually wrong in your allocations. The whole thing just becomes a mess if you don't really stick to the discipline.
Well, my kudos to Councilmember Jeans and Holloway and former council members over 10 years, it's not perfect yet, but we've been steadily moving in this direction. And it is kind of an unusual amount of discipline required from councils that you don't often see. And so I do really applaud the leadership the council's provided for this community over the past decade, because they've had the discipline to keep away from doing exactly what you're describing. Because it does all start falling apart if you don't have the discipline not to touch those pots of money.
And other cities our size don't have these, are not in a strong fiscal position because they haven't done this, and therefore they're struggling to replace systems. They have all kinds of problems that this method of management that this council has been following, previous versions of this council, is just, and I just think we're so far ahead of where we could be, and I'm just so impressed with where we are, and just hope that we stick with it. My question is, this broadband feasibility study, the fact that it's here tells me that, I've never been clear on this. This is, I know, popped up in city. This tells me this is something that we would use as the city. This is not for the population. This is for the city's use, or why is it in this fund as opposed to some, what is it for?
So this is, the city has, there are conduits out within
But
located.
it's for us to use or for
This
citizens
is
to use?
Potentially the community.
Potentially the community.
So that strikes me as odd that this would be in the IT, ISF. It just doesn't seem like the right place for it.
Like community development or something.
Yeah, like community development or something.
Well, it's kind of their expertise. I mean, we give some.
Well,
talk
I understand that they'll do it, but it's not, remember, what we're trying to do with our financial statements, we're trying to show this is what we're spending. We're spending this on public safety, police, public safety, fire. This is not money we're spending on our internal IT. This is money we're spending on doing something we plan to deliver to the community. So I would think it would be out in community development or some other department that shows what we're delivering out to the population. So it's just something to think about. It's only 15 grand, but something to think about.
Okay. All right, so with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Terry and Rachel, I think these guys probably want at least a 4 or 5 minute break, and we got to flip over the video and start the next section anyway, so we'll be right with you. So with that, the special council budget meeting is adjourned, and we will re-adjourn with Salish deliberations at 7:35 sharp.